was ill. You back?
Carl wanted to know who was going to be our clerk.
Nothing about job performance. Nothing. I heard you left early to go to the doctor. I'm sorry. Oh, that was Lynn. It was from the 6th city manager, so how would I know, you know?
Try again, Carl. Oh, dear.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call a Placerville City Council meeting of February 11th, 2014, 6 p.m. open session to order. And would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Zito, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Vice Mayor Borelli? Here. Mayor Hagan?
Here.
Councilmember Patton?
Here.
Councilmember Thomas?
Here.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Here.
Do we have any announcements to the public or presentations to the public? I see none scheduled. Do you want to make a quick announcement?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a brief announcement. Would like to thank everyone for coming out to the community meeting that Benjamin Moore gave on the 28th, I believe. At that meeting, we announced that the painting would start the week of April 14th. And there's been a slight delay in that, so I would like to get that message out to everyone. I think the lead testing process is a bit more arduous than they thought. Also, I just learned that our city is actually the biggest city, I believe, that Benjamin Moore is doing. And so it looks like our painting will be delayed till late spring. We're probably looking at June. So I just wanted to update you. And when we have more concrete dates, we will certainly pass that on. But I wanted to get that word out to you. So Benjamin Moore just wants to make sure that they're doing this right and crossing all their T's and dotting their I's so we can have the best results possible. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
At this time, do we have any closed session report there, Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council did not take reportable action in closed session this evening.
Okay. And at this point, I'd like to move to adopt the agenda with the change on moving item 11.4 ahead of 11.1.
So moved.
That's the only change.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. There are no ceremonial matters scheduled. At this time, we're on item 7, public comment. Brief, non-agenda items. I was expecting some folks from the high school here. I don't see them. So at this point, we'll start with any written comments or communications. I know we've received a few things up here, but they're designed for stuff that's on the agenda. So with that being said, I'll move to oral communications. Any comments from the public?
Good evening, Mayor Hagan, members of the council. My name is Mike Kobus, and I'm here representing the Placerville Drive Business Association, and more specifically, the Hangtown Holiday Ice Rink. As I know all of you are aware, we ran the ice rink from approximately December 15th, I think, right around December 14th to about January 7th. It was a 23-day period. It was a little shorter than what we would really wanted to, but we did have some time constraints put on to us by the fairgrounds. But during that 23-day period, we had almost 6,200 skaters on the ice. It was amazing. If we would have been able to run it a little bit longer, I'm pretty sure that we would have probably cracked a whole bunch more. The way it all worked is the first week that we were open for business, we had about 1,000 skaters. And the kids were still in school and finals week was going on. Then the second week, right before Christmas, we had little over 2,000 skaters. And then the third week, up to January 7th, I believe it was, we had little over 3,000 skaters. So 6,200 skaters in a 23-day period. It was phenomenal. But I just have to tell you, And I want to thank then Mayor Thomas for the beautiful letter that she wrote to us, thanking us for putting on the Hangtown Holiday Ice Rink. I really appreciate that. We really appreciated that. But just to let you guys know, putting on an ice rink like that was a major endeavor, a lot of work and a lot of financial commitment. I want to thank several members of the council because I know a lot of you folks donated to help the ice rink go through, and it was great. I mean, we had donations from as little as $20 to as much as $5,000. Actually, $10,000. We had one donation. So what our plan is moving forward, we're already working on it towards next year. We're in negotiations with the fairgrounds. What we want to do is, instead of just running it for 23 days, like I said, we had time constraints put on by the fair, and where we put the ice rink, which was right there in front of the Forney building, they can only let us have it for that 23 days. So we're kind of talking with them about putting it maybe over by Blue Gate, by the Rayleigh's Gate there, potentially putting in a permanent pad, which they could use, for not only an ice rink, but also for parking out in the big grassy area out there, and running it for a longer period of time. Our goal is hopefully to run it from Thanksgiving weekend through about the middle of January. We would probably, that whole 2 weeks or so between Thanksgiving and when the Christmas holidays really start kicking off, we'd probably only be open a couple of days a week there, weekends, Friday, Saturday. But what we liked about that is, say if we were closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we could open that up to private parties, because we had a lot of people that wanted to have private parties, be it birthday parties or whatever. So we're also, we've got big plans. We're also thinking about potentially, maybe, hopefully, actually purchasing our own ice rink. We're actually in negotiations with the people that provided us with the rink last year of having that for ourselves, and then we would run it, and we would be able to take all the receipts and be able to pump it back into, paying off the ice rink and also other projects throughout the city is what we're hoping for, because, there is money to be made there eventually. But as I said, it does take quite a financial commitment from our citizens and from our governments. Last year we were fortunate enough to receive a grant from El Dorado County. So the only thing that I'm asking you guys is that I know budgeting is coming up and you're going to be having those hearings. So I would just really like it if there was some way you could put it into the budget to maybe, scratch off a little coin for our Hangtown Holiday Ice Rink, so we could make this thing happen again, and not just for this year, but for 10 years, 15 years in the future. So anyhow, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Do I have any other public comments for non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close public comment, and we're at the consent calendar. At this point, does anybody on the city council wish to remove an item from consent? It's items 8.1 through 8.8. Any comments, questions? Okay, you're
Move for approval.
Second?
moved and second. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments from the audience regarding any of the items that we're going to take action on? Items 8.1 through 8.8. Seeing none, we'll call for the roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. And at this point, then, we are on to ordinances. Item 9.1. It's the first reading of an ordinance adding section or chapter 14 to water systems backflow cross connection. Mr. Rivas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city engineer, Mr. Nate Stong, will give the staff report.
Okay.
Thank you, Pierre, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Have a pleasure to bring this ordinance before you. We've been working on it for a while, and it helps how we address the city water system with respect to backflow and comply with the state code, specifically California Administrative Code, Title 17, for public health mandates that all public water purveyors implement a cross-connection control program for the purposes of protecting the public water supply from pollution and/or contamination. And before you, the proposed ordinance will help the city meet the requirements of the state code by adding Chapter 14, Water System Backflow and Cross-Connection Control, to Title 17, Health and Sanitation of the City Code. And as a brief background and overview, the prior policy within the city relied on the state code, and we have a position, water quality specialist. I think that position has been renamed to utility services technician currently, but that position was tasked with ensuring that devices are installed, backflow prevention devices, on all accounts, water service accounts, which may pose a potential cross-connection threat or backflow threat. And all commercial accounts are required to have backflow protection, and those devices are required to be tested annually. The prior program had the water quality specialist enforce the annual testing requirement through quite an administrative burden for one person. Would send a letter to each and every owner asking that they have their device tested, and then would receive some measure of response, perhaps 50%. So then would follow up with a second letter to the remaining 50. You know, your device needs to be tested this year, and then give a timeline for that compliance, and with leading up to and including water service termination. But you can imagine the repeat letters and keeping track of all the devices. So I was intrigued to hear of EID's recent, and I think it was 3 years ago, they implemented their program where they took the annual testing in-house and charged the customer a nominal fee on each billing cycle. And they achieve superior efficiency with the overall cost of the program, and as well as the administrative, the cost, staff time and costs associated with it. So that's contained within the proposed ordinance, proposed Chapter 7-14-8 goes through that. And I don't know if you'd care to turn to that page with me, but that's the meat of the ordinance, where the key differences are with relation to state code. Well, I mean, they comply with state code, but this is our policy on how we do that and run the program with regard to testing annually. And the procedure would be to solicit proposals for the testing. I'm proposing that we hire a contractor for 2 years, and to reduce the burden on soliciting proposals, as well as establishing a fee that would last for some substantial duration. And then that proposal will be a per device fee for testing, and we would incorporate that into a master fee schedule with the addition of administrative costs. So for an example, we ran a somewhat emergency program, if you will. The position was not staffed for calendar year 2013 for water quality specialist, and during the month of December, we had solicited proposals, bids, and achieved a $20 per unit cost of testing each device, which is far less than the $75 per that I'm seeing as a market, going rate for a customer. And we, essentially passed those savings along to the customer and tested their devices for them during the month of December, and proposed to do that continuing more formally under this program. So I believe with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Does anybody, City Council have any questions?
I don't have a question. I was just going to comment. On my commercial building, I have EID water, and I used to have to every year have that tested, and it just involves so many phone calls and blah, 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 blah. And I totally agree that when EID took it over, it made it so much easier. They still have to call and tell me, that they're going to do it, but it goes like clockwork, and it's just so much easier. So I'm certainly in support of this. And $20? Oh my gosh, grab it.
Yeah.
That's a great price.
The response this year was extremely positive. 98% everybody was,
Yeah.
was surprised to hear of the cost. And the $20, we did not include any staff time, so we, basically ate a week's worth or so, I'm estimating
Well, I
of.
might be wrong, but I think EID does their own. I think they don't hire an outside contractor to come in.
They do hire an outside contractor, and they're getting, I think, $13 a device with all their thousands of devices that
Oh,
further
okay.
economy of scale.
That's not what they charge me.
No.
Not
No,
what
there-
they
there's-
charge
Everyone,
me.
check that out.
So now, what I'm wondering is that there might be a lot of folks are going to be surprised when they find, the fault with whatever's going to go on. So are we prepared for that?
Fault with regard to what? I'm sorry.
With like when they do the backflow test and it doesn't,
And it fails.
When
It
it fails?
that can run into some bucks.
It can. I think the repairs, hundreds, or the replacement would be maybe a couple hundred or 300. The repair could be as low as 100. And this program, it differs from EIDs in that we will not take responsibility for the repair of any device. So just the test, and if it fails, there's a notification about the failure, and the responsibility for repair would be on the customer.
And then they have a certain amount of time to.
Right, and the timeline for compliance.
Any other questions?
I do.
Yes, Carol.
Nate, was there any conversation with EID about just piggybacking with them, or would their specialists be willing to take on the city?
We did talk about that. They were not interested in having their contractor work on our customers' devices. They didn't feel that was appropriate.
He's an outside contractor.
And so the other question I have has to do with existing, say, non-residential customers. Would they be then, Patty sort of touched on it, what if their system fails? Are we testing right now?
Yes.
And so what happens right now if their system fails the backflow?
We have been sending them letters notifying them of that occurrence. And actually, I think our contractor has been fabulous as far as coordinating with each customer. Certain customers have needs that the water can't be shut off for even the short duration that's needed
Right.
for the test. So he's been coordinating ahead of time for that, and then following up with the results. And then we follow up with a formal letter that says, your device failed. You have X number of days. I think it's 45. And then if we follow up, if nothing happens within the 45, we have a 2-week and then a 48-hour after that before shutting off the water.
Have we terminated anyone's water service?
No.
Is this the beginning of putting those giant backflow preventers along the sidewalks on Main Street?
I think you might be referring to the independent restaurant has one.
Well, that's a new
That's
construction. I'm actually referring to the old construction. Like if you look behind Robinson's Drugs and the dry cleaners, I think, had to put one in.
Yeah.
So, I have a huge concern with what that will do to our sidewalks. So, do we have a plan of attack of how we're going to do some of these older sections?
I share that concern, and the other area that this program differs from EIDs is that EID requires what's called a reduced pressure principal detector backflow device, which is required to be installed above ground. And there are double check valves that can be installed in a box below sidewalk grade. We do not require from the get-go the kind that needs to be above ground. So depending on the survey that the water quality, we need to hire a cross-connection control specialist, somebody that's certified, conduct the survey of the plumbing in the premises and determine the proper level of protection. So in some cases, it may be the RP device, the reduced pressure, which is above ground, and we'd have to find a spot on Main Street to put it. I note that Torino's has put theirs in an attractive wood box, and there are, I think, other options that one could, a bench or something, you could hide them in street furniture, and not just have the ugly green jackets around. But then, in the majority of businesses, I don't think would pose the level of risk. If a bookstore or an antique store or something that wouldn't have the level of risk that would need an RP type device. So
That was another one of my questions, was what would be a potential threat to the public water supply? I mean, an example of a business that might have a dry cleaner, yeah, so, yeah.
Dry cleaner, a restaurant has a soda dispenser, there's a chance that the dispenser comes in contact with the fluid, like a hose in a bucket is a threat. So something similar where there's no air gap separation. So a soda dispenser in a restaurant would be a threat.
A threat
Sinks,
to the public water supply is a soda
Potentially.
dispenser. Okay, that's about it, thanks.
Want to go to the engineering on that?
No?
Any other questions from staff or of staff? Okay, at this point then I'll open up the public comments on this item.
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident and Measure H committee member. Thank you, Nate. You finally put this thing into perspective. I read this thing twice. I graduated from a university, and I still didn't have a clear idea what it was really about, except it did sound like, okay, we're doing something to protect our public water supply, but who, what, where, why was not very clear there. So it sounds like this only applies to commercial and not to residential. Is that correct? And if so, then it sounds like you already have everything in place to find any problems that are there. So thank you for clarifying this, because it was not clear at all to me when I read it, and I did read it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Smith?
Good evening, Kirk Smith. I'm glad the last speaker understood what he was talking about, because I still don't. And I just think you're an amazing group of people to get an agenda on Thursday and then assimilate all this information. Like, if somebody could explain to me what a double check assembly and distinguish that from a reduced pressure principle backflow prevention assembly and a hydroponic or hydromorphic gas assembly is, I'd really like to know. The difference that he described between EID system and yours is that you're going to transfer the cost for this kind of work to the consumer and give them 60 days in which to do it. For a lot of the properties, at least that's what the
We've been doing it for several years.
Pardon?
This has been a requirement for several years. And
What's new
EID
about it
charges
then?
a substantial.
What's new about it then? If it's been
It's-
required
it's-
for several years.
We're updating the process and the ordinance, so.
So you've always had
It's
it
been
where-
voluntary. There's been, and it was explained in this document,
I'm
that a letter went out to businesses asking for voluntary compliance. And when they installed them, they were helped by the engineering department and by the water department, and we had a fellow that used to do it. During the cutbacks, we haven't had the full-time availability of a guy just to do that. So it's got pushed back, and so we're trying to formalize it more. And that's what he indicated initially. That's what Mr. Strom said that initially, so, when he opened up the thing. So yeah, go ahead. You have any additional questions?
So what you're saying is that what's new is what? If it's been around here before, you still have, there's nothing voluntary about saying that you're going to impose sanctions like passing on the cost to the customer. That's not voluntary.
I don't know.
Let me try and explain.
There's a whole
if that's all
series
right,
of
Mayor.
sanctions in here
Yeah.
that doesn't
But
sound voluntary at all.
The state puts the sanctions on.
Right,
pardon?
the state mandates this program. We're required to do a backflow prevention program, okay? In the past, what we did is we sent letters to the owners, the business owners, and told them, you need to get your backflow prevention device tested. They would then go hire a private contractor to get that tested and submit the certification to the city, okay? Generally, those costs for a private contractor range anywhere, I'm guessing $75 to $100 for them to do that. This last year, we actually, because of some time constraints we ran into and emergencies we ran into, we actually sent a letter out to all the business owners and told them, we are going to do this, and we've contracted with someone to test it for you for $20. You will be billed the $20 unless you contact us and say, no, I'll have it done myself. I don't want you to do that. What we're doing now is going to a program where we will do it annually, and there is a provision where someone can opt out of it if they don't want to, but if they opt out, they still have to provide certification to the city that they got it done. And we will bill them on their utility bill, I think is the way, or a separate billing. We're still looking at that, how that's gonna be done over the year for that amount that, to do that testing. So the difference is, before we asked them to do the testing and provide us certification showing they had it done. Now we're going to do that for them and bill them at probably a much lower cost, because we can get a bulk rate for a lot of those. And then we will have the certification ourselves to talk for that.
That's helpful to know, and I appreciate the lower cost. Once it's determined that a customer needs a repair, what would those costs be typically?
I don't know.
It depends. You heard our city engineer mention some
You
things.
mentioned
It
100,
depends
it's the lowest end. I'm just wondering if they have, because a lot of the businesses on Main Street, you've got 100-plus-year-old properties. I know for one, when I worked for plumbing on one recently, you run up an obstacle that most wouldn't have, like a 2-foot cement stone wall that's been around for 100-plus years. And you got to go through that in order to put in plumbing. So I just wondered what the cost potentially could be. Does anybody know?
It depends on what is needed. If it's completely replaced, you heard our city engineer state it could be up to $300 for a complete replacement, or possibly more.
So it's up to
depending on
300.
Plumbing and et cetera, it could be more. It just depends on the situation.
Thank you.
Do I have any other?
And I'm sorry, I don't know the cost of repair. It's a customer-owned device. It's always been the customer's responsibility to repair the device. We are just changing the way that it's tested.
My experience, it cost me about 15 years ago, about $600 to put it in, and I was paying, before EID took over the inspections, I was paying about $75 to $100 a year for the testing, which included minor repairs. So, hope that helps you. Okay. And
And to answer Sue's question on
Sue?
the only commercial, there are cases where you would have a residence that would require it if there was a well serving the property, dual plumbed condition, so it could apply to residences as well as temporary construction meters or other temporary meter connections. So there are other cases besides just commercial or industrial accounts.
okay, thank you. At this point, I've been asked for action from the board. Council.
Move to introduce and waive the first reading of an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City Council adding Chapter 14, Water System Backflow and Cross Connection Control to Title 7 of the Placerville City Code.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Second was by Ms. Borelli.
Vice Mayor Borelli,
Aye.
Mayor Hagan,
Aye.
Councilmember Patton,
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
Pass unanimous. We are on item 10.1. And I believe, Mr. Voss, you have that? That is the adoption of the resolutions around the approving the general plan amendment and the housing element.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The City Council is being asked to consider the Planning Commission's recommendation to receive, adopt, and file the negative declaration prepared for the housing element update and to adopt the update for the housing element for the 2013 through 2021 planning period. To give a little background, a housing element is one of 7 mandatory elements required under state law. The purpose of a housing element is to identify and analyze existing and projected housing needs in an effort to preserve, improve, and develop housing for all economic segments of the community in accordance with state law. A housing element is the only general plan element for which state certification is required. The certification is done by the State Department of Housing and Community Development after its adoption by the city. State law further dictates that when a housing element must be updated, depending upon the region within the state. The city is a jurisdiction within the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, also known as SACOG region. The city must update and adopt its housing element within 120 calendar days after the October 31st, 2013, or February 28th, 2014, for the city to remain within the 8-year housing element planning cycle. Failure to do so would require the city to update its housing element then every 4 years. The current update began in early 2013. The Commission held a housing element workshop, and staff developed and implemented a housing survey, conducted various meetings with housing advocates, developers, and local service providers to solicit input regarding housing resources and housing-related issues. Administrative draft, the 2013-2021 Housing Element Update, was submitted to HCD in August of 2013. HCD provided its comments to the city in a letter dated October 9th of 2013. And that letter is provided as Exhibit A of the staff report. During October and November of 2013, staff made edits to the draft housing element in response to HCD's review comments. In addition, staff also prepared an initial study per the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act to evaluate the potential environmental impacts of implementation of the housing element update. The initial study indicated that the project would not result in potential for significant environmental impacts. Therefore, staff prepared a negative declaration and circulated it for the 30-day review period in accordance with state statute. The 30-day period began on December 6th of 2013 and ended on January the 6th of 2014. No comments were received during the review period. In fact, staff had only received one comment received on the regarding the negative declaration during the Planning Commission hearing. The draft housing element update covers the city housing policies, goals, and objectives for the 8-year planning period from 2013 through 2021. Discussed within the housing element update are population growth and trends, housing characteristics, housing costs, residentially zoned land inventory, and constraints to development of housing and special housing needs. Also discussed in the update is the city's fair share housing need for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG region, known as our RENA numbers. Figure 1 on page 3 of the staff report shows that the city's regional housing needs allocation, or RENA, for the planning period of 2013 to 21 housing element planning period, a total of 372 dwelling units is the city's regional fair share over this planning period. That 372 dwelling units comprise the following: 39 units for extremely low income households, and that's defined as household incomes between 0 to 30% of the median household income of the city. Based on the U.S. Census data, the median household income in the city is approximately $52,200. 39 units are for the very low income households, and that's household income between 30 to 50% of the median household income of the city. 55 units are for low income households, and those would be household incomes between 51 and 80% of the median household income. 69 units are for moderate income households, and those would be households with income between 81 to 120% of the median household income. And then finally, 170 units for above moderate income families, and those would be household incomes over 120% of the median household income. So with regards to the housing strategy to meet this goal, the housing update includes a housing strategy which identifies how the city will meet its housing needs identified in the update. This strategy includes programs that are designed for implementation over the planning period to meet its general plan goals of providing land inventory to meet its fair share housing needs, to facilitate the housing of special needs households, such as the disabled, preserve existing housing stock, and conserve affordable housing opportunities. Much of the housing strategy programs were carried over from the 2008-2013 housing element planning period, including the high density development program at the 20 units per acre density. New programs were added to address new statutory requirements that have now come into effect, and I'll highlight some of those programs. For example, program number 3, that's the high density development. Staff addressed potential rezone sites needed to meet its unmet RENA inventory available to serve lower income households. That would be extremely low, very low, and low at the residential 5 or 20 units per dwelling unit per acre density as required under state law. It is anticipated that future rezoning will accommodate all unmet lower income RENA needs for the current planning period and the unmet need for the 2008-2013 previous planning period. Program 4. Program 4 is, refers to single room occupancy units. This program would revise the zoning ordinance to address state law requirement that the city encourage and facilitate a variety of housing types, including single room occupancy, known as SRO units. The city does not currently define or address SROs in its zoning ordinance. Program 6 addresses employee housing. This program would amend the zoning ordinance to accommodate the provisions of the Employee Housing Act. The zoning ordinance would be amended as necessary to permit, by right, in any zone that allows a single-family residential uses, a residential structure providing accommodation for 6 or fewer agricultural employees. Also, the estate residential zone text would be revised to permit as an agricultural use employee housing consisting of no more than 36 beds in a group quarters, or 12 units or spaces designed for use by a single family or household. The RE zone is the city's only agricultural zone. And the last is Program 8. This program will address transitional, supportive, and emergency housing in compliance with the requirement of Senate Bill 2 to increase opportunities for development of transitional and supportive housing in the city's mixed-use zone, which permits residential uses. Text amendments to the commercial, business professional, highway commercial, central business district, and convenience commercial zones are proposed to comply with Senate Bill 2, which would be subjecting transitional and supportive housing projects only to those, with only those restrictions that would otherwise apply to other residential uses in the same zone. So moving on to the review by the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission's recommendation of the housing element. The Planning Commission considered the housing element update and negative declaration prepared at their January 7th, 2014 hearing. The staff report prepared for the Planning Commission is contained in your staff report as Exhibit D. The Commission recommended that the Council adopt the negative declaration and adopt the housing element update. In addition, the Commission did suggest that the Council give careful consideration to the following, and I'll go ahead and read those into the record. The notification that was sent to property owners as required by law, and 2, the adequacy of the negative declaration, specifically with regard to program versus project, and then 3, staff's recommendation of the parcels chosen for meeting the city's regional housing needs allocation for lower income housing. In response to the verbal comments that were received at the Planning Commission hearing and a single written comment received prior, the staff has recommended that revisions contained within Exhibit E of your staff report be considered and approved as part of the amended housing element. These revisions amount to an increase in the number of potential sites for the city to consider to rezone to the RE5 multifamily zone district, as shown in Table 4 in Appendix E, to meet its unmet need for lower income groups land inventory to comply with state law. The modifications made to the draft housing element following the review by the Planning Commission may continue to rely on the environmental analysis contained in the general plan final environmental impact report and the proposed negative declaration and initial study under consideration for this housing element update. The new parcels identified in the revised list of potential sites are either presently zoned for multifamily use or commercial use with a history of residential use and or are in close proximity to residential uses and services. In addition, the build-out potential projected by the EIR for the general plan has not occurred, and the development which has occurred has not been at the density level envisioned in the EIR and in the general plan at build-out. The general plan build-out is 9,005 dwelling units. The number of existing units in the city as of 2010 is 4,667 dwelling units per the Department of Finance. As you can see, it can be deduced that the number of dwelling units currently existing would be well below build-out. The revisions of the housing element are within the scope of the city's current general plan and require no further review under CEQA. The list of potential sites for the rezone are only proposed and are not exclusive and do not constitute a definitive project for which an analysis of specific impacts can occur. That analysis would occur when the rezone of the land occurs or when a development project comes before the city. The City Council's consideration of the draft housing element does not include the actual rezoning of any property, only the adoption of an inventory of potential sites that may be suitable for future rezoning. Following the adoption of the housing element, staff will commence with a more thorough evaluation of these potential sites listed and any other sites that may be identified prior to initiating the more formal rezoning process, including the necessary environmental review in accordance with CEQA. Should any property be considered by the city for rezoning, a formal public process would begin, including environmental review process required. The process would include public hearings before the Planning Commission and the City Council for approval. With regards to public notice and comment, a public hearing notice for consideration of the update and the negative declaration by the Planning Commission's hearing on January 7th meeting was published in the Mountain Democrat on December 6th of 2013. The notice was mailed to all property owners and to those property owners within 500 feet of all sites identified within the update as potential rezoning sites. Only one written comment was received regarding the housing element update. That letter was received via fax from Mr. Michael Cook, representing Sutter Community Bank. Sutter Community Bank owns parcels identified for potential rezoning to the 20 units per acre in both the existing housing element and then one parcel in the current housing element update. The public hearing notice for the Planning Commission's January 7th meeting to consider the Planning Commission's recommendation on the negative declaration was published in the Mountain Democrat on December 6th of 2013. The notice was mailed to all owners identified in the list of potential and property owners adjoining the site. The public hearing notice for consideration of the housing element by the City Council was advertised in the Mountain Democrat on January 17th of 2014. The owners of properties on the list of potential sites were also notified directly by mail notice. Conclusion and recommendation: it is expected that with the city's existing residential inventory and proposed housing programs, the city will have more than adequate sites available to meet its total fair share RENA number of 372 units during the planning period of 2013 through 2021. Covered by the update, and this would include the 106 units of unmet lower income need from the 2008-2013 planning period. Staff is making the following recommendations to the City Council, and that would be: 1, to conduct a public hearing to receive public comment on the housing element update and the proposed negative declaration prepared, and adopt a resolution adopting the negative declaration and housing element as recommended by the Planning Commission and approving the amendments recommended by staff contained in the errata identified as Exhibit E in the staff report for the 2013-2021 planning period. And then finally, direct staff to transmit the resolution and adopted housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for review and certification. Staff would like to make one correction to the resolution, and that would be on Section 3, Paragraph C. It's a minor change, and it's changing zoning to land use. We were referring to the general plan land use designation as opposed to zoning. That concludes staff's report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Any questions of Mr. Rivas, Vice Council?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I spent a little time with staff yesterday getting a lot of my questions answered, and I want to thank you for the just the excellent work on this. I know it represents a lot of hours, and I thought your staff report was excellent. Couple questions, Mr. Voss. Do we have an inventory of existing affordable housing, and how does that play in with our allotment that we're required to, provide?
Currently, we do not. The staff is proposing to actually create such an inventory. because I think it's important to understand what is the mix of housing that we currently have within the city. So we're currently doing that. And also important to remember that when the RENA numbers are determined, it's determined on a planning cycle period. And so a agency or a jurisdiction does not get credit for existing currently utilized affordable housing. So in other words, it's pretty clear, at least to staff, that the city's been fairly successful in providing affordable housing for low and very low income. But when the new RENA's numbers come in, it's for the next planning period, and that would be then to provide for new units to be constructed.
Okay, all right. And I guess my last question at this time is, I appreciate that with this new change that the R5 categories are spread out throughout our city. It will seem to reduce the impact on our community by not having it concentrated in all one area. Do we have a timeline for the rezoning? I know we have to do it this year, I believe. What does that process look like? How long do you expect it to take, and what is our approximate timeline on that?
We actually have two timelines now under statute. Because the city did not rezone those sites for the last planning period, that's a 2008, 2013 housing element, we have 106 units that we're going to have to rezone for, and we have 1 year to do so after the city adopts the housing element. And then for the next planning cycle from 2014 to 2021, we have 133 units we need to rezone for, and that's at the 20 unit per acre density. We have 3 years to do that. But what staff will be proposing is staff will probably come back to the council with a resolution of intent to amend the zoning map and to amend the zoning text to accommodate these changes. But we will do that all concurrently. We're not going to wait. We will actually rezone all the necessary properties available to meet the RENA needs for both the existing and then the next planning cycle for the housing element.
Okay, so you're proposing that be done within a year of adoption of the housing element?
Yes, in order to be in compliance, we have to we have to at least rezone properties sufficient to accommodate the 106 units that we were required to do under the existing housing element.
And so an EIR is part of that process, is that right?
Staff anticipates that we would prepare an environmental impact report to address those specific impacts.
So
yes.
So we need to get going on this, because that's a lengthy process, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Rivas, thank you for spreading out the proposed sites. I appreciate that. Do we have an idea of when we will, when the state will issue new RENA numbers?
The new RENA numbers would come out then at the end of this next planning cycle, if we retain the 8-year cycle. So probably in the year 2020.
2020. Just playing devil's advocate, what happens if those RENA numbers show that we don't need as much as we have already zoned for?
It doesn't really work that way. When the new RENAs come out, it will be then for the next planning period,
Right.
and so it's based on basically the state housing and community development rely on Department of Finance. They will rely on the census data, and they actually prepare an allocation to the various council of governments throughout the state. So they will issue a number then for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments region. So that applies to all 6 counties and then the 24 some odd cities that are within the SACOG region. SACOG then has the task of taking that allocation and further allocating to its member agencies.
Do you foresee a time when there might be credit given for existing? Has there been any movement from any of the other jurisdictions within SACOG's umbrella for getting credit for what you already have?
I am not aware of any such proposal.
I hear a
at
letter
this
writing
time.
campaign.
Any questions? Okay. To answer your question, as at SACOG last week at a committee meeting, I made that suggestion that we lobby HCDC through our assembly and senators that it's time to take hold of this. And the example I'm using, and I'll use right now is this period we've just been through, there was no credit given for homes that were vacant. There is no credit given for your density of low income or ultra low income, if you will, housing currently. So they don't even look at a percentage of what you have. And this has been an argument by several of the SACOG board members over the last 2 years as they've been going through these arena numbers. And again, I brought it up again the other day at our transportation committee, because as they're doing the update of the 2035 metropolitan transportation plan, which is all the major roads in the area, not the city streets. We're just flabbergasted that they haven't taken this. And again, the other thing is they only give you credit through federal funding anyway for new roads. So we're pushing for fix first, and hopefully over the next year and a half, as they prepare the current plan, about 50% of the budget's going to go toward that, and we're pushing the federal government to look at that closely, and the state also. So anyway, these are things that we're going to have to push through our League of Cities and through our local legislators, because this city and this county is taking a big hit on the number of, quote, projected units we're supposed to provide. And the other thing is there is currently no funding available or incentive for a developer to even develop low-income housing, as could be witnessed by our last 4-year cycle. We were assigned 106, and how many did we build? 0. And it's not because it wasn't the zoning. It's not because the land wasn't there. It was because there wasn't funding available for the developers to come in and do that kind of a thing. There's got to be some kind of incentive for them to do it. You can't build and force them to charge low rents and limit their income, and yet not give some kind of assistance to develop the property. But anyway, that's kind of a long drawn-out answer. And SACOG doesn't review this. This is sent to HCDC directly. They're the ones that we have to answer to. SACOG only helps generate the numbers and divide the numbers up through the region. And in fact, they've actually been very helpful. My understanding is that you and Cleve met with a couple of members from SACOG this past week or the week before to get some clarification and some additional help in these areas. So thanks again for going down there.
Mr. Mayor, I have
yes.
a quick clarification to back you up on that. It's so easy to think of SACOG as this evil entity that is mandating this, and that is not the case. These numbers are coming from, or this mandate is coming from the state of California, and we would have to do this whether we were a member of SACOG or not, and I think that's a really important clarification to make. And actually, because we are a member of SACOG, we have a voice at the table, and if there's something that isn't working for our community, we have a much better chance at changing that than if we weren't a member of SACOG. I mean, good luck, taking it to the state. So I just think that's a really important clarification to make.
I just have a real quick question.
Yes.
What are the penalties if we don't do that?
Well, the biggest penalty would be we would have to redo it in 4 years and not 8, correct, Mr. Rivas? Approximately.
If the city fails to adopt within the prescribed time period, then we would default to a 4-year planning time frame. So, and we would be subjected to 2 sequential 4-year planning time periods. So if we're able then to do the 2 4-year cycles correctly, well, then we would then go back to the 8-year. If the city decides not to adopt a housing element at all, or if we submit a housing element to HCD and they find it deficient and then they fail to certify it, and then the city fails to correct the identified deficiencies, we could then lose funding through grant programs that are issued through the state or the federal government. We could be subject to lawsuits for having a general plan that's not in compliant with state law. I can give you some examples. It was a very interesting webpage that the city of Roseville has, and they have what's called frequently asked questions regarding the housing element. And one of the questions that was addressed was, Other cities have been sued due to noncompliance of their housing element. What has been the basis of some of these suits and the penalties assessed? Well, the city of Folsom, you may remember, they previously signed an agreement with the housing advocacy groups to produce 650 affordable units within a period of 4 years. The city didn't adhere to the agreement and was sued by Legal Services of Northern California. And the court ordered a moratorium on development of 600 acres until the housing element was certified by HCD. In the city of Mission Viejo, the city of Mission Viejo failed to comply with a commitment in its housing element to rezone adequate sites, such as we're proposing to do in our housing element. HCD subsequently rescinded its certification of the housing element, and a lawsuit was brought by the California Affordable Housing Law Project and Legal Aid. The court issued a writ against the city and ordered a moratorium on 3 sites the city had identified but had not rezoned. In the city of Pleasanton, they committed to rezoning 30 to 40 acres to high-density residential in its housing element. The city failed to rezone the properties, and similar to the Mission Viejo case, HCD rescinded its certification of the housing element. Urban Habitat subsequently filed a lawsuit based on the housing element noncompliance, as well as voter-approved growth management ordinance. The California Attorney General joined the lawsuit in August of 2009, and the case remains pending. So that gives you sort of a flavor of some of the more extreme consequences that could happen should the city of Placerville not adopt an adequate housing element that we would hope that this HCD would certify.
Probably also call it the Full Employment Act for attorneys. Okay, at this point, I'll open the public hearing on this particular item. Any comments? Oops,
It's at the
sorry.
Planning Commission meeting as well, and I'm glad to see that you listened and made some very sensible modifications. Those modifications, to me, appear to reduce the potential for effects so that you now meet the neg deck for CEQA criteria. I am appalled to hear that we have no current inventory of how many units we actually have that meet the criteria, and that I'm not surprised that there is no credit given, but the fact is, if you don't even have a current inventory, how are you going to ask for any credit? You have to have the inventory first so that you can go back and push back. And Placerville still needs an effective slope ordinance. We need that really bad in our topography in this city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Very briefly, I'm Michael Cook of Hefner, Stark and Roy. We are the ones who submitted the letter and appeared at the Planning Commission. We had significant concerns about the prior housing element update, but the city manager and city attorney and the city planning staff have worked with us and by themselves without us, and have addressed the majority of our concerns, and we appreciate that very much. Just wanted to put that on the record. We're still concerned. We have 4.4 acres or 4.1 acres that's included in the list of potential. That's much better than what we were previously confronted with. It's probably going to be workable, and we're looking forward to working with staff through the rezoning process. We're at least a potential site now. We're still very concerned, though, and it's a mandate being placed on you, which then gets pushed down on somebody else, which includes us, but we're real concerned about the economic viability, the marketability of getting 20 units to the acre on our site. I don't know about the others. It's just it's a difficult challenge. But you've done what you need to do with the housing element update. We very much appreciate all the revisions, and provided that your action tonight is adopting the element in its current configuration. I think you've addressed all of the issues that we raised in a fashion about as good as we could expect for now. We'll look forward to working continually in a cooperative manner on our 4.1 acre site over the next year or 3 years or 8 years, hopefully, if we're one of the potential sites that drops out. Anyway, thank you, and I wanted to make sure that you knew how appreciative we are of your staff's work.
Thank you for speaking highly of staff. I'd just like to let you know that I also have that concern that no concern at the HCDC level is given for topography. And I just find that abhorrent that we are doing this. So that was another option, or another object that I brought up to SACOG, that I don't care, when you look at a city that's 8 square miles or approximately 8 miles from one end to the other, the chief would probably give me the actual mileage, or maybe the director of development. And we're in a canyon. You know, I live at the top of the hill, the next person lives at the bottom of the hill, and you know, I don't ride a bike down the hill because I don't want to be able to ride it. I can't ride it up the hill at my age. But there is no, you know, my lot is probably an acre, and the minimum zoning on my street is a 1/4 acre to a 1/2 acre. And the reality is, if the developer had his way, they would have all been 1/4 acre lots. And in your case, from a marketing standpoint, it would seem to me that somebody that has a zoning R5 in this case versus R4 would be thrilled because they're able to get more units on in that thing. But when you look at the topography, primarily, it's almost impossible. And I understand, and your development costs are, you know, far offset the viability of building more units per acre. So anyway, thank you very much for your kind words about our staff, and we did follow through, and we heard you loud and clear. So thanks a lot. Any additional comments from the public?
Evelyn Veerkamp. I have a question which possibly was answered already, but this is Greek to me, so, and hopefully I'm not the only one in the room that this is a foreign language for. My question is, we're presumably going to make a decision about the number of, if my English is incorrect for this, and forgive me, I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I know what I'm trying to ask. We're setting aside land for X number of units, apparently 372 units in this cycle. Now, we've just said that we didn't build any units previously, is that right? That we made provision, but we didn't build any. So do we keep adding to this requirement? In other words, when the next cycle comes around, are we going to have to add more even though we haven't built any? How much of Placerville can we gobble up with unused projected
I think
housing?
we got your question. So,
yeah, thank you. I would be happy if you
all
did.
right. Good.
If you understand my question.
I think so, and there's 2 answers to that. One would be the total number of housing units that we've approved in our general plan, and the other would be the housing element. So you can answer that question, please.
I believe Ms. Veerkamp is referring to the rezone, our program to rezone at the 20 units per acre. Under state statute, we're required to provide for zoning that's suitable to build at a 20 unit per acre density, because that is termed a default density. In other words, if the city was able to show through calculation based on land values, construction costs, infrastructure improvements and the like, to actually build units at a lower density that could provide in the marketplace units that be affordable to low and very low income, then we would have that option. But there has not been an apartment complex, I believe, built in the city for 15 years or more. And the city only has one 20 unit per acre apartment complex that I'm aware of, and that's the senior apartment on Clay Street that was built 15 or more years ago. So in other words, we don't have the data to be able to support that we can provide for affordable housing at a lower density. Therefore, and it's under the statute, I mean, it's not something that's pulled out of a hat, so to speak, but it was pulled out of a, you know, it came from the legislature. Right. And so for the city of Placerville, because we're a suburban jurisdiction under the law, that we have to provide for zoning at 20 units per acre. So the answer, I think, what I think she was asking in a second component of her question is it additive? Well, had the city adopted, or had the city rezoned property sufficient to address the 106 units from the current or previous housing element planning horizon, we wouldn't have had to then add that additional 106 to the cycle 5 that's under consideration. But because we didn't, we now are required to rezone within 1 year sufficient properties for 106 units, that's land at 20 units an acre, and then for the current cycle 5, 133 units. So that's why it's additive. So 8 years from now, at the year 2021, if we successfully rezone all those properties, and we didn't get any development at 20 units per acre, then we could use that inventory, should everything else be uniform, when we start our cycle 6 housing element. We don't have to keep adding.
I turned her off.
As long as the land is vacant and unutilized and meets the required density, that property is open for use for the RENA numbers. You're welcome. Great. I hope that wasn't confusing.
That was good.
Great. Is that right if I follow up to that? Because it sort of was touching on what I was asking, which is, so let's say nothing gets built in cycle 5. And we have enough land zoned for 239 units. And then we get cycle 6. And we get numbers, I don't know if we're going to get any new numbers, because you said that the new numbers won't come out till 2020.
Yes, I believe they'll probably come out a year. I think they're finalized a year before the next cycle.
So we have 239, we have zoning for 239 units. We have no project built. Then in cycle 6, do we have to rezone any more property?
No,
Not if the number's below that.
because that is inventory available for the new RENA number.
Okay, until the new RENA numbers come out, we're good with that 239. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so that kind of answered my question. And then I just wanted another little clarification, because Sue Rodman said that, I think there was just a misunderstanding of my term, existing inventory. I was referring to existing inventory of already built low and extremely low housing. And it infuriates me that we get no credit for the percentage or the quantity that we have today and the percentage of our total housing. Because quite frankly, we already carry a huge burden of low and extremely low, not only in housing stock, but also in our schools. So it's not anything new, but it really is frustrating that we get no credit for existing housing stock, not zoning, because I understand that we didn't zone properly in the last cycle, but my question was, and that's what I think that we should do as far as lobbying at SACOG and through our whatever layers we have, is lobby for that we already do a huge percentage of our housing stock is given to low and extremely low
I can
housing.
remember in past years that we patted ourselves on the back because we had such a substantial
Let me
inventory.
close the public hearing. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. So, and then now I'll bring it back to staff or council for additional questions of staff or comments.
I don't have any additional comment or questions, but I would just like to piggyback your comments and commend Mr. Cook and Sutter Bank for working with us. We really appreciate you being a collaborative partner in coming up with a mutual solution, and just want to thank them for that.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment, is to thank Councilmember Thomas for clarifying about SACOG and highlighting the importance of having a voice at the table.
Thanks. Thanks for your comments. Okay, so we have a motion to adopt this housing element?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution approving the general plan amendment 2013-01 with was there any recommendations?
No.
Wasn't there something from Planning Commission?
Oh, there's some there was some, along with Planning Commission's recommendations?
It said something about the planning, I'm just reading it real quick.
We need to include those?
Do we need to include those, Pierre?
I would recommend that you just go ahead and make the motion to approve as is outlined in the staff report or in the agenda. Basically, that was part of my summary, and so I was giving a lot greater detail. In essence, what you're doing is I just wanted it, for everybody to be clear, you're considering a recommendation by the Planning Commission, and you're also further considering those amendments that were recommended by staff subsequent to the Planning Commission's hearing based on comments received and the letter received from Mr. Cook. And so...
And the change that you said, you stated in section 3, you had a change.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that we would modify in the resolution as a reference to general plan zoning when it should have been general plan land use designation as opposed to zoning designation. It was just an incorrect term used.
All right, so I'll make
I'll
that
second.
motion.
Okay, so moved and seconded.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Please
You're welcome.
call roll.
Vice Mayor Borelli,
Aye.
Mayor Hagan,
Aye.
Councilmember Patton,
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
Adopted.
Okay, thank you, that passes. We'll move on to 11.4, and thanks again for all the comments from the public. 11.4 would be Mr. Warren, and this is again we're going to have some speakers from EID as well. It's regarding the drought emergency, and I know it doesn't seem like it this weekend, but compared to what we haven't had all year, it was a drop in the bucket. Literally.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. And tonight we do have Mary Lynn Carlton, El Dorado Irrigation District's Director of Communications and Community Relations, and Brian Mueller, EID's Director of Engineering, here to update the council on the status of our water supplies. They will also talk about the excuse me, Stage 2 water alert that was recently adopted by the EID Board of Directors and what it means for city ratepayers. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mary Lynn and Brian.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mayor Hagan, council members. Like Dave said, EID is in a Stage 2 drought mode right now. We also referred to on the screen that our board did declare an emergency condition. I'll get into a little bit about what that means. Just going over a little bit of history, and just as a pre-warning, this presentation was meant for our board. We went over a lot of this stuff last week with our board. It gets a little bit technical, so I'll try to skim over some of that stuff as we go through. But I think it's important just to describe the conditions we're facing and the status of our water supplies. The district adopted a drought preparedness plan back in 2008. And then not too many people remember, but the district did declare a Stage 1 drought in March of 2009. 2008 was a really dry year, and then the winter of 2008-2009 was also dry, so the district declared a Stage 1. Fortunately, the spring of 2009 was really wet and bailed us out, and so that Stage 1 drought declaration was lifted. But going more towards the near term now, the district has really been concerned with the water supply conditions as well as the state. Probably since about a year ago, starting in January, it really stopped raining in this area. So we went through all of 2013 really dry. In fact, 2013 was it was the driest calendar year on record that the state's ever seen. And then obviously, everybody's seen the pictures of Folsom and just, we haven't got a whole lot of rain this winter. So our staff went to our board in early January describing some of these conditions that I'll show here. And then just recently, a week ago, our board declared a Stage 2 drought declaration. From the first time that we updated our board, the governor declared a statewide drought emergency on January 17th. At that same time, we were looking at our water supply conditions, and they were continuing to deteriorate. And I have some graphs that'll show some of that. Our fear is that this water year, following back-to-back dry years in the past, could really put us in a bad situation, especially you see the reference to capturing our full pre-1914 Project 184 water right, and I'll get into that. And then an ongoing concern is what if we have another dry winter going into 2015? So we really want to start taking some steps now to guard against that situation. So last week our board adopted a resolution declaring a stage 2 water warning. So what that means at this point is 30% voluntary conservation. It's interesting, the staff recommendation actually last week was to go through an orderly progression starting with stage 1, which was a 15% voluntary reduction. We anticipated we would be going, if it continued to stay dry, into a stage 2 fairly soon, but with the data that we showed, that some of it I'll show here, our board really took that step to go just to skip right over stage 1 and go straight to stage 2. Also in the recommendation, and we had a lot of discussion last week about whether to impose a conservation rate or a drought surcharge. Our board wanted to wait on that until we're going to discuss it again in March, but they wanted to wait on that, see how our customers do conserve over this next few weeks. And so we put off that discussion of any surcharge. And then finally, the resolution declared an emergency condition. And what we're trying to do there, we have our Project 184 system is subject to a FERC license. And with that license comes certain conditions with mandatory fish flow releases in the South Fork of the American River. As we were looking through this and looking at a condition where we had no snow up in our upper reservoirs, it wasn't looking good. And so if we were to continue with that FERC license conditions and mandating bypassing flows in the American River, we could really be at jeopardy of losing some of the water rights that we would count on. This is just a quick overview of our water system. I think just important to identify just mainly the sources. So you can see up here in the eastern part of our system, we have what we call a Project 184 4-bay water rights, a total of about 15,000 acre feet. And just for reference, an acre foot of water in this area would probably serve about 2 single-family homes. Of course, we have Jenkinson Lake. This is our primary water source up in Pollock Pines. The total capacity of that reservoir is about 41,000 acre feet. We call that a 2-year supply. We typically take about half of that supply of the capacity of that reservoir for consumptive use. And then down in El Dorado Hills, we draw some water out of Folsom Lake and deliver that to the El Dorado Hills customers. We have different water sources there. So in summary, all 3 of these are in jeopardy with dry conditions of being cut back and not available for our full consumptive use. Just starting with Jenkinson Lake, just going over some of these conditions. That currently is at a reduced capacity than normal. Just at the end of January, before this recent rainstorm, we were about 26,000 acre feet, which is about 63% full. And we've been comparing it. I have some other slides. We're doing a lot of comparisons to the 1976-1977 drought. That was the biggest drought that we've seen in this area. And so this January, we're about equal to where we were in 1976 going into that major drought. We also have a pretty well integrated system, and we can deliver water between watersheds, so we can deliver some water from our Project 184 system through the South Fork of the American River into Jenkinson Lake through this Hazel Creek Tunnel. With the dry condition that we had in 2013, we were able to deliver some water into there. So it was about 3,500 acre feet. So really without that, our Jenkinson Lake would have been even worse condition than 1976. And then we're also implementing some operational strategies with the system that we have, trying to conserve, all with the goal to conserve some of that water in Jenkinson Lake for carryover. This I'll go through fairly fast. We have 3 treatment plants, so that we have ways that we can bring some treatment plants that are usually offline during the winter, bring them online, and what that does is reduces our demand out of Jenkinson Lake. So the Reservoir 1 water treatment plant and El Dorado Hills water treatment plant have been brought online this winter. We also have a powerhouse, the El Dorado El Dorado Powerhouse. That has really been curtailed this year. We're trying to hold as much storage as we can in our reservoirs and not send that to the powerhouse, and we lose that for consumptive purposes. And then also, as I mentioned, importing the available water that we can through this Hazel Creek Tunnel, and that would supplement Jenkinson Lake. We were able to do that in 2013, and then with each storm, as the water in the river rises, we have just small windows to turn that powerhouse on to supplement some of our revenue. This is a picture taken, this is back in January 10th, actually, of Jenkinson Lake. This is the lake as, at about 63% capacity. And this is a chart that shows, trying to compare again where we're at now with 1976-77 drought. And so if you look, the area under the blue is the typical filling period, and then we hit in the summertime, and then the reservoir starts drawing down. That's the average. And the yellow is where we're at right now. So you can see, in comparing that with the red, which is the 1976 going into 1977 drought. So obviously the concern going into this winter was, the reservoir was continuing to drop through winter into January, when we should have been in a filling cycle at that time. And it was really approaching, and we're really still paralleling this 1976 storage line. It has upticked a little bit, especially with this recent storm. We got a lot of inflow into Jenkinson Lake, so that's very encouraging, but we're still, like you can see, tracking fairly closely with the major drought that we had. Moving down to Folsom Lake, Folsom was a lot worse. It was only 70% of capacity. That's really been a tourist attraction over the last couple months, really low. That from what I understand, has increased about 21 feet with this last storm over the weekend, which is great. We take a little bit of water out of this, usually about 7,000 acre feet or so per year. We anticipate those supplies will be cut back for various reasons, so in total, we estimate probably about a 60% reduction of our supply through El Dorado Hills. This is just a picture of our pump. We have about 9 pumps in Folsom Lake that pumps water through casings up into the El Dorado Hills system. The level was just about 10 feet higher than what the historical low is of Folsom Lake since it was built. The historic low was about 347. Folsom Lake, before it rise with this last storm, was about 357. And the concern there doesn't really involve Placerville too much, but just that lake level, if it continues to decline, we're going to have to install some temporary pumps in order to continue to make that system reliable. And then finally, just moving to our Project 184 water rights. These are the water rights I was referring to that we're really concerned about. These are some of the oldest water rights in the state, pre-1914 water rights. So usually these are the last and most sacred in the state. And all our studies and all of our assumptions in the past have been that this was a secure supply in any type of dry year. We would always be able to count on this 15,000 acre feet. Well, in January, there was hardly any snow up in these reservoirs. What the reservoirs consist of with the supply is Caples Lake, Silver Lake, Echo Lake, and Lake Aloha. So those 4 lakes make up the water supply for this source. And I mentioned the FERC license conditions. All of our conditions were set so that, and our bypass flows at the Kaiser Diversion Dam were set so that we can always count on this water supply. Well, this year was so dramatically different and worse, actually, than 76, 77, that we realized that we may not be able to get all this supply, and that would really affect our entire system. So that's what I mentioned. Part of our emergency declaration is to try to get some relief from some of the conditions, and so that we can allow us to store more water in that watershed. These are our license conditions. So just looking here, we're in a critically dry water year, and what this represents is the required flows that we're supposed to bypass in the American River, by month. So you see here in February, we are scheduled to have to increase our flows in the American River to 20 CFS from 15. and it would go all the way up to 60 CFS, you know, at the summertime. We did some modeling effort to try to see what would happen with the reservoirs if we continued with the conditions now and if we continued with those flows. And this is really what it showed. If we continued with a dry year forecast, you can see Silver Lake would be totally empty by September. Capos Lake would be down to 0 storage by July. And then Echo and Aloha, which are smaller lakes, but they would also be in the same situation. So that really concerned us, and that was the cause of us adopting a resolution to declare an emergency, trying to get some relief from those requirements. And this is basically just kind of what I said, that, you know, all 4 reservoirs would be empty. It would really impact both our consumptive uses, but it also could mean, if in worst case condition, that, you know, by end of summer we wouldn't have any water even to bypass flows in the American River. And it would also, you know, result if we didn't get enough water at this source, we would have to draw Jenkinson Lake down even farther. So it's just kind of a chain reaction type of effect. We do have some articles in our license that allows us to temporarily deviate from those minimum flows, and we exercise that right. And what we're doing is just maintaining our current flows of 15 CFS, not ramping those flows up. Doing some other reductions in flows through those reservoirs, through the outflows. And then we're currently working on a proposal. We have to go to FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the state board in order to adopt a more permanent flow as long as the drought persists. So that's what we're working on, to try to figure out what flows are acceptable in order to conserve those supplies. Some of the other actions in a resolution, moving farther down the hill on the wastewater side, actually, we have a wastewater treatment plant. This is the Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant. Another regulatory requirement that we're required is to release about 1 million gallons per day into Deer Creek. This is treated recycled water, almost drinking water standard that we're required to release to maintain the riparian habitat of the stream. With the drought declaration, with the governor's resolution, we're seeking to make a temporary variance for this, and what this would do is allow us to not release that 1 MGD discharge, and that would also allow us to put more of the recycled water into our system, and it helps to save on the potable water supplies. Another part of the resolution, waiving competitive bidding requirements. This was also done back in 1977 drought. With this drought, there's some funding that may be available for some projects that would help alleviate drought conditions. We've got a project like the main ditch piping. We have a ditch that loses about 1,000 acre-feet of water per year. So we're hopeful that we can, through this drought, get some funding and fast track that type of project to save water. Moving to the water demands, part of the 30% conservation, we're trying to track that through our water treatment plants. So we'll be monitoring on a weekly basis the flows that are coming out of our water treatment plants. There was a lot of discussion last week at our board meeting about the demands, and so this last January, as everybody knows, was very warm, and our demands were about 27% higher than the average demand in January, and that's what this shows. So this is January demands here, and this is the 3-year average. So I think a lot of this went to the board's skipping over stage 1, is that, you know, we need to get 30% conservation, at least to get down to the average, and then, you know, even more to rectify some of the situations. So that was a real big concern, is that our customers and overall production is higher this last month than it was. And I think the rain over the weekend will help that, and I think we'll see that coming down, but we still need to reinforce that we still need conservation moving forward. And again, this is just another chart of Jenkinson Lake, and the comparison just showing the yellow is where we're tracking now compared with the 1976 drought. One of the things that we're working on as staff is trying to figure out what type of carryover storage we need. And the concern, again, if we have another dry winter, we want to be prepared for that just in case. So we're trying to come up with a storage target for Jenkinson Lake and what level of conservation would be required to get to that target so that we have a little bit of carryover storage and get it in a little bit better shape than what we were in 1977. These are the drought stages. So we have 4 stages. So obviously we're in stage 2 right now, which is the 30% voluntary conservation. Stage 3, if conditions worsen, it would go up to a 50% mandatory conservation. Stage 4 is just really, the worst that it can get, where we're just talking about health and safety type of uses. I mentioned we have a drought preparedness plan, a drought action plan, which is just a supplementary document to our drought preparedness plan. Those are available on our website if anybody's interested. And it details a lot of the actions and the background for how we go through the drought. And at this point, Mary Lynn will come up and just talk about some of the public outreach.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening. One of the things that we decided to do at the request of the board, and we thought it was a good idea, is really embrace a public outreach, try to do everything in our power that we could to tell our customers, tell the community, the stakeholders that, conserve now. If you conserve now, you band together and do this, then we're not going to have to impose a surcharge. And the board very much wanted to do this. So we're like really going gung-ho with this outreach, and it's really starting to explode. Yesterday, Channel 3 just called me up, and they said, we're on the way up. I don't know if any of you saw it, but they interviewed me, and they interviewed a local farmer, and so they had a nice story on Channel 3 about conservation. And then around noon today, KFBK called, and so I've been on the radio this afternoon, and Channel 10's called, and it's hard to keep up with the calls, it's crazy, but it's a good crazy because we really want to get that message out. So what we're doing, we're, in addition to, of course, speaking with you here tonight, we're speaking with a lot of public groups, we're speaking with chambers, we're going to do a joint chamber meeting, we're school districts, we're in a meeting today with Jeremy Myers, superintendent of schools, and his direct staff, and we're going to be meeting with all of his superintendents in a meeting in March. And what we want to do is come up with a strategy to use this drought as an opportunity to not only get stakeholders to engage in the conservation, but to teach children all about this. This can be a teaching moment, and maybe do poster exhibits by the kids and have them write papers and then use some of their work in our community outreach. And of course, we can share with you all whatever we do. If you want some of this stuff for your newsletters, any of this stuff that we've got on our website, we will be happy to share with you. So we're talking to homeowners associations, CSDs. We're going to be talking to the Board of Supervisors in a couple of weeks, and we're very pleased that you accommodated us tonight. We have a web page. One of the handouts I brought to you, and members of the public, they're back there in the back. It has it's a page that's got a lot of different materials on it. We want to be totally transparent. It's got all of our board materials. Anytime we do a board presentation, the staff reports on there, as well as the PowerPoints. Our news releases, anything related to drought, we're going to stick on this page. In addition to, we have our Office of Water Efficiency. They have a lot of tips and ideas and some types of freebies that we can give out. And I know you all have us do the water efficiency for you, right? So we've got toilet flappers and dye kits to see if your toilet's leaking and lots of things like that. But we also have a lot of tips about Be Water Smart. It's a campaign that the Regional Water Authority put together, and we're a member of the RWA. And so lots of tips on that, lots of tips on the Save Our Water statewide website. So we link those directly on our website. There's even a consumer calculator. We're going to try to pull that up on our website so people see that easier and more readily available to them. And then some information about the Association of California Water Agencies. They have a drought watch and water conditions put out by the Department of Water Resources. The other thing we've got on there, like Brian mentioned, are our drought plans. And we have this handy sheet that's in the back. It's how to save water by 30% indoor and outdoor. And I got to tell you, my phone's been ringing off the hook. I was telling Brian, every time it rings, I don't know who's calling. I don't know if it's my neighbor. I don't know if it's an angry customer or if it's somebody from KFBK saying, okay, we're going to turn the mic on you in 10 seconds. But people are really, really concerned because we've had so many people who have said, look, I have done everything I can do. A year ago when you all imposed, as you know, we've had to do some rate increases. And I really, I feel for these people because they say we don't have yards, or our kids aren't, we're mandating that they only take showers every 2 or 3 days, and a lot of stuff people are doing. And so what I say back to them, because there's not a lot I can say, how do you tell them to save more when they're already saving so much? I say to them, engage your neighbors, rally around less than the next month or two, really save the water so that our board is not going to be feeling like they're going to have to go to a mandated conservation goal of 30% and a surcharge. The board at the last meeting, we were recommending a 15% surcharge, staff was, because we really actually called for some voluntary conservation in January and we didn't get it. And so hopefully, and the people I've talked to, they say, okay, I get that, and so they're going to start talking to the neighbors. And so on our website, we're going to try to, all this stuff really is a toolkit that we've got on our website, but I think if I make a little toolkit and put on there and say, hey, here's a toolkit, take this, print this out, here are the posters, camera ready, share this with these neighbors, it could help. So some of the other stuff that we're doing today, we sent out a second email blast to our customers. We have about 24% of our customers have allowed us to contact them whenever there's something important going on by email. And so it's a conservation message. We have also utilized our Rapid Notify telephone automated system once already, and same kind of messaging, and we're going to be doing that again next week. We've developed a drought brochure. It just went to the printer today. It looks like this. I'll show you in the back. But it shows where we are, stage 2. It has some conservation tips on the back. Simple mailer, that'll be going. It's a direct mail. It's going to all of our customers. And we're looking at maybe doing some simple, they'll sort of look like campaign style signs about this big by that big that you'll see at busy intersections in El Dorado County that'll just be a simple message like save water now, conserve 30% in the EID drought page website. And so those kind of things. So we're hitting it all over the place. We were even thinking about Caltrans, seeing if we could use their electronic sign, but I just heard from somebody today there's already a message. And so that's good. It's just a broad message. It's some conservation message. So really, that's what we're looking at. And media interviews, like I mentioned, I'm just going to see if I missed anything. I don't think I did. It's just we're trying everything, including engaging children, because they can nag their parents a lot. And if they hear it from their teacher, maybe they'll believe it more than their parents not to take a long shower. So anyway, with that, any questions? That's what I've got. Any for Brian or I?
Any questions?
I just have a curious one. When Brian, you kept talking, you kept mentioning and comparing, and the charts all compared was the 76 drought. But since 76, you guys have done a lot of water, and the most obvious ones are covering the reservoirs and the ditches. You've eliminated a lot of the open ditches and stuff. So was that factored in when you are comparing 76 and now?
Yeah, I mean, certainly another big factor different than 76 is just our customer base. So yeah, we've done a lot on the conservation side compared with where we were back then. But we've also, on the other hand, we've got a lot more customers. So that, I don't know if they balance out, but it's certainly a concern if we're tracking right now with 76, 77 with our existing customer base. I think that goes a lot into
That was a big issue. I remember that. A lot of people said, they're all that open water, blah, 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 so.
With the open reservoirs, yeah, that certainly helped. That was more of a public health thing and not so much of a water conservation, but that certainly helped. The ditches, through the 90s, we went through a large program to eliminate a lot of our ditches. Right. That was a really big water loss for us, and so that's been rectified for the most part.
And one other question. I just returned from a cruise. And one of the things that they tell you there, you go to a program and they show you what they do on this ship. And a lot of it is about water and what they do to treat it and the desalinization and how they make it work, all on this one little ship. And I keep saying, and a lot of the people that were on the ship kept saying, why can't we do that? Why can't we use more of that? Why? So maybe you can answer that question.
Use more desal?
Just everything. I mean, the way they, no, I know, and I mean, I don't mean only, I know the desalinization, but they just talk about, you know, the retreated water and, you know, how they go about doing all that.
Well, we do have a really good and pretty expansive recycled water program, and that's mainly in El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park. So a lot of the wastewater that comes into our two main wastewater treatment plants, we recycle as much as that we can, and that gets treated to near drinking water standards and gets pumped back into a separate recycled water system. You know, you're familiar with Serrano and the dual plumbed water homes that we have there. Yeah. So that really saves, you know, thousands of acre feet of water supply for us. So I guess that's kind of the comparison with the cruise line as far as the recycled water.
No, I was just kind of laughing because that was certainly the topic of the ship. Yeah. There were a lot of Californians on that ship.
Brian and Lynn, whoever wants to answer, but the question that you answered is the people that are already conserving and have conserved over the years because of our increase in rates and our increase in our sewer rates, they're stating, I've already saved 20%. I'm only a household of 2. And these are the things that comments to me, and it's what more can we do? And I was glad to hear you say, encourage your neighbors. And I understand that this is an aggregate savings goal of 30%.
Correct.
It's not a mandated, if somebody's already down and they're using substantially less. One of the suggestions I did receive, though, was that we talk about gallons per day per person in a household. Mm-hmm. And everybody gets their bill in cubic feet. It doesn't mean anything to the average person. So it needs to be some of the simple conversion factors you can do. And I also heard on the news that there was a scare factor that we were going to raise our rates. And I guess that's their interpretation of the next step if we go on. But my understanding is the board did not take action. That was just what their assumption was in talking to you on KFBK?
Yeah.
Because they put it out like an emergency broadcast to get listeners, obviously.
They like to do that.
It's kind of like the Olympics. You'd listen for the controversy coming up next. It's like,
I basically did tell them right now we do not have a drought surcharge in place.
Right.
And they know it, but they still like to twist it a little bit.
Just tweak few
But
important words.
I forgot to say this, and I want to say it. I thank you, Mountain Democrat, because you guys, they've been very good about really putting a lot of water-saving tips in their newspaper and the editorial and so forth, and that's helpful.
I win. But yeah, thank you very much for that information. And,
okay, well, thank you very much.
So at this point.
And one other thing, I hear what you're saying about personalizing the gallons. I heard that this morning, too, in another meeting, so we're going to see what we can do with that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that people need to, I mean, I get my bill and it goes away, you know, it's something I get on email, and so I don't look at the consumption as much as I look at the dollar amount, typically. And that's probably the way with most people. So if we can, you know, have some numbers and have access to that information on our prior usage, like my PG&E bill online.
You might tell them, on the back of the bill, there is your prior usage for 1 year ago, so there's a look back of 12 months. And if you need more, like if you're just curious and you don't keep all of your bills for several years, which most people don't, you can call our customer service department and they can run a little graph for you on your usage.
Great, thank you. Dave, we have some more on 11.4 to...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Brian and Mary Lynn. If you don't mind, if I can borrow some of the publication material for our notices. Thank you. And as they indicated, we do need to begin conserving, and some of the things the city's doing up on the screen there is we're reducing our irrigation levels in all parks and open space. by 45%. We're inspecting all our irrigation systems and making repairs as needed. We're deferring new plantings. We have a heightened, Mr. Yule's department has a heightened leak detection and repair protocol to make sure our mains and water laterals are repaired quickly. We're minimizing or deferring pressure washing activities, for instance, the parking structure, sidewalks, so on and so forth. Expanding use of pool covers during warmer conditions to further reduce evaporation. We're exploring the use of water reclamation facility effluent or water for mobile construction use rather than hydrant water. We're also looking at washing fleet vehicles at car wash establishments that use recycled water whenever possible. And we're also urging all city employees and contractors to begin conserving water during the day-to-day operations. And again, like EID, we're going to be posting a public notice on the city's website and Facebook page. We'll also distribute a similar notice in the March 10th utility bills. What the notice will call for, as discussed earlier, is a 30% water conservation on a voluntary basis. We'll also reach out to the 10% highest users within our inventory. And as Mary Lynn indicated, both the city and EID recognize that there are a number of residents and businesses who are doing a large amount of water conservation already, including installing water efficient fixtures and reducing water use habits. And as the mayor indicated, it may be very difficult for some people to reduce their consumption by 30%. However, there may be some residents and businesses who can conserve more than 30%. The intent of the resolution, again, is to request ratepayers to voluntarily evaluate their individual consumption and reduce the city's aggregate water consumption by 30%. And we also have some water saving tips, which I won't read, but they're up there, be included in the notice. And as Mary Lynn indicated, EID does administer our water efficiency program. City ratepayers can request complimentary plumbing retrofits for self-installation and take advantage of EID's irrigation efficiency rebates. And for more information on that, check out eid.org. And just as full disclosure, if the entire city does conserve 30%, there is a budget impact, and that budget impact is estimated to be $176,513 between today and June 30th. This can be absorbed by your Water Enterprise Fund, unforeseen expenditures, contingency, and operating reserve if necessary. Staff is also prepared to seek federal and state drought relief whenever possible, and we'll also provide you with additional analysis and recommendations at your mid-year budget report at the next meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Warren?
I do, and perhaps, I do, and perhaps with Pierre. We've certainly seen how important this is tonight, and thank you so much, Brian and Mary Lynn, for coming to really clarify this for us, which will then help us get the message out to our users. I have to ask the question, should we revisit our prohibition on artificial turf within the city? Certainly lawns are, I think they equate for about 50% of water usage, and I struggle with this because I don't necessarily like the idea, but as I've been thinking about it, what do we want to see? Do we want to see attractive yards, or this isn't going to get any better probably, dried up lawns all over our city, and perhaps using quality measures, having strict guidelines, because certainly all artificial turf is not equal, and having a review process, conditional use permit, or something like that to achieve the quality of the product. But I just have to ask a question.
Staff is currently reviewing its development guidelines, and so we're working through the Planning Commission, going through the document and updating it. So that's a timely comment. Staff will certainly take a look at the landscaping portion of our development guidelines and see how we can modify that so that there isn't a prohibition. Maybe not necessarily AstroTurf or something like that, but
Right.
mainly just an emphasis on xeriscaping, drought-tolerant plants. There's a number of xeriscape demonstration gardens, you know, in the city and other parts of the county as well. The county library has a demonstration garden of xeriscaping. The EID headquarters on Mosquito Road has a demonstration garden as well of xeriscape, and so we'll take a look at that. That's a good comment.
Because there are perhaps ways that it could be used effectively. It's worth asking the question, because there's a lot at stake here.
I'd like to clarify that. That has to do with the commercial properties primarily. I don't believe there's any restrictions on residential use of whatever you want to use for your yard, right?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
We do not regulate single-family residential.
Right.
We would
Yeah.
regulate
Thank you for that
multifamily
clarification.
and commercial. That's
Right.
correct.
And one last comment is in looking at how the city can help get this message of conservation out, I would love to see our message on our city's website really prominent. You know, right now our conservation measures are a couple of links down on the utility section, and I'd love it to be real user-friendly and approachable and understandable, so you know people don't have to figure out what we're saying here. Make it real. What's that? Real user-friendly, and I liked your examples from EID, so thank you for sharing your information with us. So those are all my comments. Thank you.
I wasn't prepared until you said that about artificial turf, but I would caution the council, or if the staff is really going to look at that, that there is an unintended consequence in using basically plastic grass, and that is what you do with it after it's had its useful purpose. And I for one, am not interested. I think you can do as much or more with xeriscaping and drought-tolerant trees and shrubs as you can with a plastic turf. So I'm just stating my balance here. So we've worked a long time on landscaping issues in this county. And one of the first things I was ever involved in was when EID came out with, I don't think it was in '76, I think it was in the mid-'80s, with a mandate that all new landscaping would be curtailed in light of a drought that we were in at that particular moment. And it motivated the landscape industry to get together and band together and actually lobby EID to restrict that ban on new landscaping. And from that came the library garden, and we did many not only xeriscapes, but educational forums. We did oak tree symposiums. We did forums at different nurseries. And so there is a lot of education, and I really think we have beautiful landscaping here, beautiful oak trees, and a lot of the shrubs are beautiful. We don't really, I would not be in favor of advocating ever for AstroTurf.
And all the home and garden shows are doing wonderful
There's
plans.
lots of alternatives.
All right. So at this point, unless somebody else up here has a comment,
I'm sorry. Can I have one more thing to say?
as long as it's about water.
It is. It's about
Okay.
this flyer right here is so simple and so easy to read. I would like to see us, I know Dave asked for some of the literature, but I thought this was really well done. And Mary Lynn was talking about trying to get the calculator on the front of EID's website, but if they could do that, I think that would be a cool thing to have on our website, because it's a constantly updating item.
Yeah, and my comment is about you understand, or I understand anyway, there is and I'd forgotten about it until you mentioned it, but Dave is our finance guy. There is an unintended consequence when we encourage this, that we'll have less income in that department. However, I think at this point it's so important and so imperative that we work on this, that we really do look for ways of cutting this and ways of going after some federal drought relief funds or state, so that we can take care of that. And I'm sure, one of the things that's going to be really cool is our EID bill that I see on our warrants every month. It's going to go way down, so that's good. So, yes, Marilyn.
On that subject, from what I understand, there is some consideration being given to different entities for reimbursement for these drought costs. And so we've been asked to put together what we anticipate that we're going to spend out of the ordinary for the rest of the year on this drought. So today I put together my little budget and wish list for communications materials. So you might check with OES for the county. I think they're coordinating some of that.
And I think your finance director would give us also
Yeah,
good
we
on his
can- we
projections
can
on what he's
talk.
going to do. So, great. Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public regarding this item? Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, Measure H, water is one of my passions here, and I think that gallons per person for our website would really be a great idea. I like that one. And also, one of the things you need to be careful with AstroTurf and plastic lawn is if you're putting that around your native oaks, you could cause root rot and really cause a problem, so you kill your oak trees. So you may not want to do that. But there's $200 million of funding out there that's been approved by Congress for the state of California to deal with our drought. And I think we need to be real proactive and go after some of that and repair some of our leaking water delivery systems. I suspect that if we repaired the horrendous amount of leaks that we have in our current water system so that we are not paying EID for water that is simply leaking out of our pipes, we would not see as nearly as big a drop in our income balance.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Just a couple of quickies, and in this case, I actually do understand the language, so it should go a whole lot faster. Another tip, I don't have a garbage disposal, therefore I don't waste water down the drain getting rid of my garbage. I should suggest that we start composting our garbage or scraping it into the rubbish bin and sending it off with the rubbish. I have no idea how many gallons go down the drain for garbage disposals, but I actually think that they're a terrible waste. I'm sure that EID has no control over the fact that Folsom Lake was being drained at the rate apparently of 1 billion gallons a day prior to the declaration of the drought. But I really think that that kind of thing should be discouraged. Any of us could have said that there was a drought long before they stopped draining Folsom Lake of 1 billion gallons a day. The other thing that really worries a lot of us who are thinking about these things is the fact that up here we're all metered, and I have no objections to having metered water consumption. But it's apparent that in some areas a whole lot of water consumers are not metered. And I really would like to see some kind of regularization throughout the state. Because whereas we perhaps are conserving, my understanding is that in non-metered areas, the drought is not quite so important. And I think it should be equally important in those areas. Thank you.
Thanks. Any additional comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearings on this. I believe there are state regulations now that all new developments and a lot of the old developments are having to convert over. Sacramento County is one of the worst offenders of that, and I believe they're at in excess of 50% now, and they're still moving forward, and I don't know the exact numbers, but yes, they're requiring meters down there now, finally. And again, I moved here in the 76, 77, 78 time, and I saw the results of the drought at that early time. So, yeah, and at that time, Sacramento still obviously didn't have meters or required them.
Yeah.
So.
We used to go down the hill and see all those sprinklers
Right,
going.
but they do restrictions on when you can water down there, so
No.
every other day and so forth. But again, it's ridiculous. So at this time, do we have a?
I move that we adopt a resolution declaring a drought state of emergency and urging Placerville ratepayers to begin reducing their baseline by 30% as prescribed by EID's State 2 Drought Alert.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to item 11.1. In fact, before I do that, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. So allow people to stand up and stretch or whatever else they have to do. All right, call the meeting back to order. We are on 11.1. So, at this time, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll first apologize. Hopefully I can get through this without going into a coughing fit with this cold I have. But, as you know, on January 23rd, the council held a workshop with staff to look at our capital needs, capital project needs, primarily streets, but also some facilities. We had quite a extensive review. I want to start this off with letting you know I do have that presentation available on the projector. If there's any questions you'd like to look at any of those slides or et cetera that were part of that, I can bring that up and take a look at those. What we wanted to do tonight, though, is kind of get, I need to caution you that we are getting into a critical time period at this point if we want to move forward with something in terms of a sales tax for the November ballot. In that presentation or my report that I gave you on the 23rd, I believe I had a timeline in there that said we should have been, looking at that, you'd say we were about 3 months behind. And it depends on how you look at it. But I want to emphasize that if you want to move forward, that we can still do this. We just need to be aware of that and be ready to move on a pretty tight time frame going forward. At that meeting, I tried to emphasize that the main focus was on streets and roads. However, there were some other facilities that we wanted to look at. And what I tried to do in this report tonight was present to you kind of a prioritization from a staff point of view. This is only our point of view, and we're open to suggestions as far as what council feels may be different from what we've shown in this report. Just to outline those, I looked at street maintenance as number one. Obviously, that's what we see as our biggest need right now. Our parking facilities, this was to a certain extent what brought this whole issue to the forefront right now, our need to look at that. Sidewalks are in great need. And then moving into facilities, police department and Old City Hall, and then there's other improvements also that we presented in there as our down at the end of the list, which includes our town hall, corporation yard, parks, and other things like that. So that's kind of a prioritization as how we viewed that we would look at things in attempting to identify funding to solve those. At the workshop, we went through several options of how we could fund these. And we talked about a parcel tax, we talked about a sales tax, we talked about a utility users tax, we talked about simply trying to get the funding through grants and things like that. We also talked about possible annexations and an increased focus on economic development that could help us in that area. All of those were considered. However, the main focus that we went to and we discussed the most was probably on the sales tax issue as a potential method of financing these facilities. And I want to emphasize that we, on a staff level, have had a lot of discussions about this. We do not go into this lightly. We recognize what this is doing. Probably the biggest concern on my part right now is simply the fact that El Dorado County is currently at 7.5%. We're already 0.5% above them, or just outside our city limits. Anything we do at this point would put us even farther above El Dorado County, who has no plans that I know of in my discussions with them to look at an increase in their sales tax. With that said, as you recall in the presentation that I made, there are also several jurisdictions that are similar to us. Down in Sacramento County, most are at 8%, so the same as we are. Some of those I have heard are looking at sales tax measures currently. Sacramento and Galt in Sacramento County are at 8.5%. Some others, for example, Placer County, all of the cities in the county and Placer County are at 7.5%, do not have any increases. However, as part of a group that Sharon Scherzinger from the El Dorado Transportation Commission is part of, she noted that Placer County is, on a county-wide basis, is looking at a sales tax measure, apparently. So all of them are looking at different things for sales tax. Dave just brought up some of the comparisons. Nevada County, you can see Nevada City is at 8.5%. Truckee and Grass Valley are at 8.125%. So, and there's the other counties in our region. Amador County are all at 8%. Of course, Tuolumne County, you can see Sonora at 8%, and the county at a lesser amount. So that's an important factor to consider. And also looking at what options do we have. In talking also to Sharon Scherzinger about this issue when we met on it, she emphasized to me that she does not see road maintenance dollars increasing. In fact, most likely you will see road maintenance dollars decreasing over the coming years. And this is a result of several things. We brought up the issue that every day it seems like they're working on more and more fuel-efficient cars, so it means our gas taxes go down. That means the federal and state government are receiving less gas taxes, which means there's less that gets passed on to us for those needs. So what I've prepared for you tonight is simply the question of, do we want to consider moving forward with something at this time regarding a sales tax, or do you want to direct staff to go back and look at other options further and consider this? Maybe this comes up in the future, but not at this current time. And the next step in this process that I would recommend if we want to proceed with a sales tax would be to look at polling. We briefly reviewed that at our last meeting and talked about the potential for polling. I presented that I had received proposals from three different companies, Probolsky Research, Godby Research, and WBC Research. I want to mention that Adam Probolsky from Probolsky Research is in our audience tonight. He was nice enough to come up and listen to the discussion and answer any questions we might have, particularly about polling. The discussion also took place regarding whether or not we do a phone survey or a mail survey, and we mentioned that during the Measure H campaign we did a mail survey and did save quite a bit of money on that particular survey. Therefore, I went back to the companies, Probolsky, or the consultants, Probolsky and Godby, and asked them what their cost would be to consult with us and help us to do a mail survey rather than a full-blown phone survey as they had proposed. Each of them came back with a cost. You can see Probolsky was $3,975 to help us with that, and Adam can give us further clarification on all of the details that would include. And Godby and Associates, this just came in yesterday, you don't have that in your report, gave us a quote of $7,500 to help us. Godby helped us with the previous Measure H campaign on a consulting basis. However, and I wasn't able to verify this with our finance director today, but according to the representative at Godby, he said he never did bill us for the work that he did for us back then, and he's not really going to now. But I kind of got the impression he may try to collect some of that if we were to do it again. So anyway, his proposal is for $7,500, and that was just mainly what he did was consulted with us on what the survey should be, how we should word it, and et cetera. Now with that, I wanted to have just a brief discussion on why do a phone survey, as I have recommended in this report, as opposed to a written survey. As you can see the cost savings in doing that. And if you have detailed questions, Adam's going to answer those for me rather than me do that. But a couple of things that I've seen in it is, number one, is that when we did the Measure H survey, we were primarily looking at, do we do a quarter-cent sales tax to lower our rates and pay for infrastructure? It's a pretty simple survey. And I haven't gone back and looked at that particularly, but that was the main question. It was a pretty simple survey. This time, as you can see in the number of options that I presented to you, there's all the way from, you could go as low as 1/8 of a cent. I'm not sure that's worth doing, but say 1/8 of a cent to a 1/2 cent, even up to a full cent that you could do potentially on a sales tax measure. Those are the options that you could look at. So you've got all of that as a possibility of doing. In addition, we've just gone through a number of facilities that we would like to test, whether or not the public would be in favor of funding those through a sales tax. And we also have the issue of do we put a sunset clause on it, which is another option, and that can be whatever you want to be. Normally, most common I've seen anyway is 10 or 30 years, and those options are there. So there's a number of different options and different things that need to be polled, and from my experience in these polls, that generally through a phone poll you ask a question, and based on that answer you then go into some education and some further questions regarding to figure out exactly what they want, the exact information that you want to get out of the survey. The other thing is that with a phone survey, the polling company will pull up those most likely voters, in other words, those that are most likely to vote in the 2014 election. Based on that, they will do a random sample of those most likely voters to see, because that's who you want to hear from, is those that are going to vote in the election, until you know how they will vote. So they get a pure random sample from that. And with a mail-out survey, we would send it out to everybody. We don't know for sure who's going to send it back in. We can find out when they mail it back in. We could have a question on there to say, find out if they were or are they one of those most likely to vote in that election. There's ways you could code it to perhaps do that, but you still don't guarantee you're going to get that random sample of most likely voters that are going to come in with that. So there's some questions about that, and from some of the experience, I've been part of a half-cent sales tax measure in another city. I was also part of a library tax another county, and a library tax in another county in previous jobs that I've held. And that polling information is extremely valuable in determining, as far as I'm concerned, it's a must. You have to have that, because you put a lot of time and energy and even money, not from the city necessarily, but from someone out there, hopefully, that will take this on and promote this sales tax measure as a way to improve our roads and improve our facilities. So there's a lot of money that could be put into it, a lot of time and energy that will be put into it to making this happen if we go this route. And we want to know right from the very beginning what our chances are of passing it, and then even from that information, catering that measure to what we believe will pass. There's also the last issue I didn't mention, and what you can test for is whether or not we do a general tax or a specific tax, which tells you whether or not you need the supermajority vote or just a majority vote. So those are the issues that are before us tonight. Do we move immediately to prepare that survey, working with the consultant to do the polling, or are we not there yet? Do we need to do some more research, some more study, and look further how we go into this? I probably should go back a little bit. I did not include information. I talked or traded some emails with Councilmember Patton regarding looking at further at economic development and annexations as a way to help fund this. And I agree with that. We absolutely should proceed with that. This is not the only thing we should do. The sales tax measure will only fund a small portion of what we really need. We need to move forward with other measures of economic development, et cetera. And I looked at that briefly today. What would it take based on kind of some quick and dirty numbers that I put together in terms of what would it take, how much development would it take to, say, produce $250,000 or $500,000 worth of sales tax. And if you'd like, I can pull up a slide that I put together kind of to look at that. Dave, can you pull up that second one? These are the numbers that I put together quickly, and just so you know, this came from our redevelopment plan. So it may be outdated just a little bit, but it's fairly accurate. It's in the last couple of years. Our current square footage of commercial space, and this does not include office. This is retail commercial space, is approximately 9 million square feet. That brings us $1.8 million per year, approximately. There's some varies, as you know, it's gone down in the last few years, but now it's coming back up. So it's approximately right now close to that number. Just doing quick math, that comes out to about 19 cents per square foot you get out of retail development. So I looked at if we wanted to bring in $250,000 a year, we would need to develop an additional 1,252,000 square feet of space, and then you equate that to $2,500,000 505,000 square feet for if we wanted to increase by $500,000. There's a lot of variables go into this. Obviously, the type of retail development varies widely. Some are more sales tax producing than others. As we know, there's no sales tax on groceries, so development of groceries type items does not necessarily increase our sales tax. Big ticket items such as auto dealerships, electronics are probably well above that per square foot price, I would guess. So this is just a kind of an average, and it's not a lot of scientific knowledge goes into this, but just kind of a simple math exercise. You can see, according to the redevelopment plan, we have 8,710,000 square feet of available commercial space. Now, I need to emphasize, yeah, according to the redevelopment plan, yeah. That 8 million square foot number includes office, and it's not just retail. It includes office and other commercial space. So
those are spaces that have been built that are
no,
vacant?
No. Those are vacant properties.
Oh, vacant properties that are available for development?
Right.
Okay.
They're zoned commercial, yes. Yeah. So you can see what that, and then you can see what that equates to as far as an annual sales tax. So that gives you hopefully some idea of the magnitude. The other piece that I wanted to mention in terms of economic development is regardless of what happens tonight, we will proceed with economic development. I think our economic development committee is doing a good job of that. We're starting to look at the implementation part of that, of our plan that was adopted, and we are going to proceed with that and to see what we can do in that area. One of the keys to that is that you're not going to see 1,252,000 square feet developed tomorrow or in November of 2014. For the most part, you're probably going to be talking about at least 5, closer to 10 years down the road before you'll see probably a significant increase unless something significant changes in the city. So I don't think we need to look at the other slides. They just talk about the pros and cons and what can be done there. But excuse me. With that, I'd like to open it up for questions and discussion from council, what your thoughts are, or where do we go from here. I have provided a recommendation that if you want to move forward, to authorize staff to enter into an agreement with Probolski, the representative who is here tonight, with a not-to-exceed figure of $10,000 to look at polling to see what works.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
Actually, I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Probolski, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
All right, great. Thank you for being with us tonight. I hear you're all the way from Irvine.
I am, but as I said, I'm here about once a week, so second hometown.
Well, thank you. How does a polling process work? And from your expert opinion, do you think that a phone survey is the way to go in this matter?
Sure. So certainly a telephone survey is optimal, and our goal is to give you as policymakers accurate data, accurate numbers. And the only way we can assure that is through a telephone survey. I can kind of explain the difference in a key way. In a telephone survey, I'm selecting the people that are responding, and we're very accommodating with callbacks and making sure we're calling at times that people can speak to us, and we're calling people on their home phones as well as their cell phones. We have the opportunity, through the fact that we're talking about public policy, to call them on their cell phones, make sure they're safe and not in driving, but that's a real key differentiator. So we're selecting who those people are and making sure they are reflective of the demographic makeup of the voters in the city. Alternatively, with a mail survey, while giving you really great directional data, I can't necessarily control who's going to respond. So we may end up with more Republicans than Democrats, or more women than men, or some other skewed scenario where perhaps older voters are being more responsive. Whereas in a telephone survey, it's my job to make sure, we've got too many seniors, we've got to get some more young people. In a mail survey, we don't have that control mechanism in place. So we might not, and likely will not, get real accurate data in a mail survey. It doesn't mean it should be off the table. It just means I don't think you're getting your best value for the dollar, and you're not getting accuracy. We oftentimes use mail surveys for lack of a better term, kind of a feel-good measure, because we do want participation. One of the things we can certainly do, if we're selected, would be to put a web-based survey in addition to the telephone survey, and that would give anyone in town the chance to respond. We would categorize those data separately, because, again, it would be a self-select scenario. But I definitely want to give everyone the chance if that's something that people want. So those are the things that we can do to kind of open up that participation. The process works like this. We would develop a survey with staff, and so I assume at some point council, says that's a great document, and then we start making the phone calls. The city manager kind of laid out all those different scenarios that you might want to test. Is this a special tax for roads or for police services, or is this a general tax where you're kind of broadly talking about the things that you might want to take care of with it? And then obviously there's the chance of an advisory measure that can kind of go alongside of that. Testing certainly the threshold, the dollar amount, the percentage might be something if you're looking at different levels. And you do that over the course of the survey. Our surveys always open up with an open-ended question. And that's another key differentiator with a mail survey versus a live interview with an interviewer. We want people to tell us what they think. And so oftentimes it's do you support or do you oppose? But sometimes it's, well, tell us what's the most important issue to you, or tell us why you support it or why you oppose it. In a telephone survey, I can capture every bit of that response, and almost sometimes it's a paragraph. Sometimes I suspect some of the people here tonight, if they're polled, will give you a lot of information. Sometimes it's very little. In a mail survey or online, people are not as likely to type out or write out their kind of full vernacular of what they're trying to communicate. And so that's another value of telephone survey. So we go through it, and in the end, we come back with a report. There's pretty PowerPoint presentations and a big, thick book of data. What's nice is you end up with segmented data that tells you broadly what the voters want, and then what parts, components of a tax and what benefits that they'd really most appreciate. And then you can start to communicate, well, that certainly gives you guidance as policymakers as to where you perhaps might allocate the additional resources. And then you can also start to communicate that's where resources might go.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Sounds like money well spent. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have any questions for the gentleman, but I am fully supportive that we do some sort of a survey, because I think I agree with Cleve that it's important to find out whether we should proceed with whatever we proceed with.
I have a couple of questions, and maybe Dave, you can answer this. In the last budget session, you indicated that there was now a revenue stream coming from the internet sales. Can you give a little bit of like how much? I have forgotten now, and I didn't look it up. Or do you know?
Sure, that's correct, Councilmember Patton.
And also, as you project that into the future, if you wouldn't mind just saying, well, if we did this much this year, based on a 3% growth, is that what your budget was?
We actually didn't assume any growth in internet sales, and the reason that was is we didn't have any information on it, what it was going to be. And it's, well, let me just, in simple terms, the quarter ending September 30th, we did receive our first internet sales tax, and it was totaled $34,000.
How much?
$34,000 for that particular quarter. Now, what that means for the next 3 quarters, you can probably estimate it's going to be somewhere around there. It's not specific to the city of Placerville. In other words, residents of the city of Placerville ordering online. It's based on it's based on our proportional overall sales tax, and it's so the internet sales tax goes into the county pool, and then it's distributed based on our proportional share of sales tax compared to El Dorado County, South Lake Tahoe, and our actual sales tax. So over a year's time, it could be as much as about $136,000, a new revenue source for you.
Okay. And there was a brief slide that I saw earlier about how the city paid for various capital improvement things before we had Measure J and Measure H. And one of the things that I was involved in many years ago was the rebuilding of the Ivy Street parking lot when that collapsed. It was an emergency situation, and lo and behold, we found $80,000 in a fund that was the leased parking. Now we have parking meters and our pay stations and leased parking, and we still don't have any money in that fund. So how does that work? I mean, what is it just because we're paying for the service, the service of the Skip and Ed?
There's a lot of changes. That program was rolled out in 2007, and at that time, there was a couple larger businesses, one particular larger business that was leasing parking from the city, and since has built its own parking lot and facility, and so that actually had a direct impact to our revenues. And just in general, leases dropped slightly. Now that the economy's improved, there has been an uptick, but it's not generating the revenue that the consultant had forecast. The original parking consultant had forecasted much higher revenues, and we were a little skeptical. We were conservative in our estimates, and we've ratcheted down over the years. But as far as parking, your general fund is actually subsidizing $27,000 toward that program, and it's barely balancing its budget. So it's a quandary.
So, and I was under, and I don't know if this is even the appropriate, is this okay to talk about this stuff here? Or should we just stay on the sales tax
Well, I think you have a
appropriateness?
concern about sales tax. The question, I mean, in my opinion, the question is, do we look at this alternatives and how deep do we want to go? And maybe some of those questions would be the depth of the questions that you want. I mean, I don't think we should talk about full budget analyzing here, because we could get into, where else can we cut to create enough money to do roads?
And that's kind of why I wanted to broach that subject,
So
because.
let's simply ask that question. So I'll go with that.
Okay. Well, I guess I am not, and I said this to Cleve, it's not a surprise that I'm not a fan of sales tax increasing. I think that already we put our city and our businesses at a disadvantage if we ask them to collect another even a quarter or an eighth of a percent, and an eighth of a percent really isn't going to do what we wanted it to do. My thought was that if we could maximize economic development, I mean, even if we don't get 1.2 million, but let's say we get a 500,000 square foot building or business or industry that generated a quarter of $1,000,000. Is that a better way to focus our energies than to tax the existing businesses and then put them in even further disadvantage with Missouri Flat Road? And Missouri Flat Road is just one bridge, and I've heard it from more than one person that nobody cares how much the sales tax is, but that's not true, because how many people do you know that go to Oregon to buy a car? And so they do think about those things, and so I was going to ask the council if there was an option 6 where we just didn't jump into this sales tax issue until we were done with the budget. And I know that puts it off for a year or two. But I feel like I don't really have the tools to say that this is the best way to do it.
I have a question now. When you buy a car, isn't it based on where you live? Or, I mean, can you drive across the line and pay no tax?
The, that's correct, although the, what we call Bradley Burns, the general fund sales tax, follows the local agency. The add-on sales tax, your Measure J and your Measure H, follows the Placerville resident. So
So we could go to Roseville and not pay Measure J or Measure H, but we would still pay we would base it without the add-ons, right?
They would pay that sales tax.
We would pay J and H?
The consumer that buys the vehicle in, say, Roseville or
Living in Placerville, buying in Roseville, do they pay H and J?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
But a consumer that purchases in Placerville does not pay, if they don't live in Placerville, does not pay that add-on, that they just pay the general 7 or 8%.
Bradley Burns, that's correct.
Okay.
I want to make a point on roads. And the California Department of Transportation did an infrastructure priorities list, and this study came out, I got a copy of it emailed to me last Thursday after our Transportation Commission. And there is, quote, some good news in the state budget. And is that in the cap and trade, there is going to be $100 million that goes back into infrastructure roads. The bad news is $50 million is going to counties and $50 million is going to cities. And it's going to be based upon your share of use or a formula. So if we are lucky, out of $50 million, one-time money, we might get, what do we get close to now, $200,000 a year? Mm-hmm. We might get $200,000 out of it, but we might get less than that. But it's one-term money. There is no long-term, I guess, there isn't anything on the horizon right now for road repairs. The money that we are able to get through dealing with SACOG and the Transportation Commission are, again, for main arterials. They're not for city streets and city roads that need to be repaired. So we get about $250,000 to $350,000 a year currently to do road maintenance and safety work. So 20-some thousand goes to striping, a small amount goes to doing minimal road repairs. So there isn't anything on the near-term horizon that is going to be available for roads. And that doesn't include the other issues we have is, again, the parking structures, the parking lots, the police department, which we've looked at for years. I haven't seen, a big uptick in dollars and cents coming in on our budget. And then if we use economic development, just to put a little, light on this, so if we were to get about $250,000 a year, if we put in 500,000 or 1 million square feet of office space, increased it, I'm sorry, by 250,000 square feet, that doesn't take into takes into consideration the increase in sales tax we receive, but it does not take into consideration the additional cost of protecting those facilities and providing services for those facilities. If somebody were to build another shopping center, we're going to go through the development department. We're going to be billing them through water. We're going to be requiring some kind of additional police protection unless we just happen to luck out and get a business that doesn't require any policing. There's just a number of other things. I mean, yeah, and if we build another hospital or additional medical, I don't think there's much in the way of sales tax that comes out of that. Last time I got a hospital bill, I don't think there was any sales tax added on. So, I mean, and that's one of the primary things we're looking at is the healthcare industry is possibly one of the growth industries that we may attract in this area. But what we need is additional sales tax revenue. And also, I guess Cleve didn't show it there, but there's a number of cities that are increasing or will be looking to increase their sales tax in the future. Currently, Folsom will be, assuming they do the same thing we're doing, they're going to be at 8.5%. So we're going to see a number of other cities at that level. Yeah, I personally would like to see us do one across the board within the county, and use it for roads. The county has a number of road issues, including Lake Tahoe area and the county roads in this area. All of them could use a big help, and they could utilize a half-cent or a quarter-cent sales tax also. And I don't know if they need additional other stuff. I'm not a county supervisor, nor do I want to pretend to be one, but I do know enough about the roads that they have as many issues about roads as we do. So anyway, I would like to see us do some kind of a survey. I think the survey could also ask the question, do we take it to a vote in November, or do we wait till the following June? I'm not sure what the answer is on that, but I'm sure there's a way to ask the timing on those things as well. So, and maybe that's a question we would ask Mr. Probalski. So, anyway.
I agree with Carol. Also, I really would hate to, I hate raising taxes, but I'm going to tell you something. I've been on this board now 7 years, and we've had this same wish list and we've added to it in these 7 years. And I know that we went through the economic downturn, but we are so far behind on what we need to do that I honestly don't see how. I mean, we'd have to have, I don't know how many, what we'd have to build. And just look around at what we have now. We have so many still vacancies. You know, so even if we built more, we're still, I just don't think that's going to pull us out of this. And as I say, just looking at this list, you can see all the things. And these are not frivolous things. These are things that we need. Our roads, the police building, the city hall repair, all these things. This building is in need. And I just don't see any way out than to capture more dollars with sales tax. And the one thing about that, and we're talking about improving economic development, and one of the big things is tourism. And that way you do capture more sales tax through people coming in that are using our roads and using all our facilities, and you know, all these things that we need this money for could help us out. And I quite frankly, I don't see how we're going to pull out of this for years and years and years unless we get some more help elsewhere. Yeah.
I have a final comment to go along with what Vice Mayor Borelli is saying. The 19 million in deferred street maintenance, that scares me right now, because that's our current conditions. And while I agree that economic development is something that we are and need to pursue, we don't have time for that to be the solution right now for today's needs. It will be, you know, a part of the solution going forward as we do it correctly, but you know, the need is now. And I like the idea that tonight's action is asking us to explore this with our residents. And, you know, money for a survey to get a feel for what our community wants, because it's not just about what we want. What does our community want? Right. And I think that's money well spent for us to give a pulse of our community. And then we could make the decision whether it makes sense to go forward with a sales tax initiative. We're not deciding that tonight. And finally, Cleve and I did explore this with the county on our 2x2s last week. We explored the idea of them participating with us in a sales tax measure. And they felt it was problematic. Our needs are so visible. You can see what our needs are. The county, it's so spread out. For their county population to approve a sales tax measure would be incredibly difficult. And it would actually probably hinder us from achieving that. So that's not a possibility right now, based on 2 of the supervisors and this county CAO. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions? I want to ask the public if they have any comments or questions at this point. It's a tag team. Dave's up.
Thank you. My name's David Price, Mayor Hagan and Council. I think that we're all on the same page here. We all want to see the better thing happen for our city. I don't think that a 1/4% or a 0.5% tax would be the end of the world for anybody. But I do see a few problems as far as it kind of being vague on exactly what we plan on doing with the money. Recently, I seen a capital improvement project happen, and it was for the exact reason of not being clear on where the money was going. It was ultimately the decision that they chose not to go through with the campaign. So it's just good to be clear, because it doesn't seem real clear exactly where we're going to put the money. And then as far as the options, I would prefer option 4 rather than option 2, and I'd actually prefer if all the options were kind of presented to the people as a possibility, so where the people would at least be able to have some input on how they felt about the options. Basically, I just, I feel for the council and your decisions you have to make. I'm more than happy to say, hey, yeah, let's go with the $10,000 and find out where we can go with this, because we are facing enormous problems in our city and throughout the country and throughout the world right now. So I think ultimately, and I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but I do like to talk about it, but we're facing a position where we're not sustainable anymore, our world and our energy and our water. So, I mean, we have to look at the real picture rather than just trying to say, well, let's get a 0.5% and build our roads and make them status quo for where they are now, but what's going to happen in 19 years? I mean, and there's lots of examples of what I'm talking about. But so anyway, I've got a lot here, but there's just, I just don't know where to go with it. It's a tough decision. I would probably be okay, like I said, with spending money to find out if we think we can pull this out. The one thing I guess I forgot here is that Proposition H won by 75%, and it was very clear on what we were doing.
Very focused.
Yeah, very focused. And it wasn't, we're going to do it here and do a little bit there. And so I think that possibly that's why I wasn't so much for proposition or choice option 2, is that it is a general tax. And now it'd be easier to get 50%, but it could throw people back and say, hey, I don't want to do this because I don't really know where the money's going. So that's just my input.
Yeah. Can I answer that quick comment? Because one of the things that we did when we're looking at more than one item, and the advantage of doing more than one item, is part 2 of the ballot initiative would be 2 processes. 1, do you agree that there's a tax? And 2, you form a committee like the Major H Committee that oversees the projects, and then that committee would have direction in the ballot of the number of projects and the priorities, and and then the committee would set up the priorities on how to actually do it. Some of those would even be possibly funded by bond initiatives or measures, because you have an income stream that shows that could be passed off or paid off over a period of time.
The committee would make the decision after it passed or before it would put to vote?
There's 2 parts to it. 1, so part A, the initiative would have to pass, in other words, the tax.
Okay.
Second, the committee would have to be passed. And,
Personally, as long as a really non-biased committee.
kind of like our Measure H committee. I mean,
Measure H has been pretty good, yes. Yeah,
Thank you.
I've been fairly happy
that's
with
the
it.
concept.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the ones that seem to be most successful in other communities. So, okay. I'm going to close it. Oh, no. go ahead.
We're not really a tag team because we've come here independently of one another and in ignorance of the possibility that any of us were coming. So I want you to take that back, please.
Me too.
Don't have a position on the sales tax per se. For me, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you do it. And I would like more information before whatever the action is. I suspect that there probably are people in the community who would feel more strongly one way or the other. The thing that I would have to say fairly strongly is, the other thing that I would like to say is that I certainly recognize the needs that exist in the city of Placerville. Everywhere we look, there is a need. So I could never argue against need. And I would be very happy to see Chief Heller and his crew have a wonderful new Taj Mahal or whatever it is they require. But I think there's a there is a reality that for all of us, we are needing to learn to live within our means. There are certainly people in Placerville for whom an extra 1/4% or an extra 1/2% might make a difference. There are a lot of people who are living a very hand-to-mouth existence, who are pushed to the limit in terms of credit, and who probably don't know where the next meal is coming from. And so for them, an extra sales tax would be a burden. So I think that whereas many of us have had to learn to live within our means, the city may also have to do that. And I'm not hoping that that's the case, but it may be the reality. One thing that I noticed in particular, though, and this is kind of a side trip for me, but it's the emphasis on what does our community want. Now, I think that there is the possibility that we're emphasizing right now what the community wants is because we have to go to them to get permission to do this. We cannot pass a sales tax without their permission. However, having said that, there is another instance in which what the community wants doesn't seem so relevant, and that has been in respect of what has been called the Roundabout Project. The community is not so relevant in that case because we don't need their permission to do it. So
No,
I'm
I'm
simply
sorry.
pointing out the contradiction.
You're pointing out a contradiction, and because you're pointing that out, I'm going to take you to task on one
Okay,
thing.
please do
is
that.
One, we do have to go to the public for permission to raise fees or rates, and we do that. In the case of water fees, water rates.
I'm not talking about water.
I know, but you talked about another item. So I'm just going to say, there are certain things we have to go to the public for and
I
ask for.
understand that.
Sales tax net.
I
Again,
understand that.
the rest of us, we are elected to do certain jobs. I don't need to go to the public every time to vote on our warrants that come out every 2 weeks.
I fully
don't need to go to
understand
the
that.
public on every 2 weeks.
And I'm not getting into that kind of
But
minutia.
you were getting into it because of what you're saying about roundabouts. So at this point, we are talking about, should we spend some money to do some polling, to ask the public what they think about different projects in the city, and or how do we fund those projects?
I
So
understand
again,
that. I will
that's what-
simply conclude,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, by saying that citizens of the city of Placerville have actually asked to be polled. They have asked for the right
Thank you.
to vote.
Goodbye. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to cut you off because you got off the subject. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it back on again?
It's on.
Okay. several comments. When you're doing a random sample, you need a fairly large population in order to do a valid random sample. Placerville is not really a randomly distributed population in itself. So to get a random sample of Placerville with a small population that we have in the city may not be as easy as the consultant tends to make it sound. Anyway, the other things I have to say are that if phone surveys actually allow people to talk about how they feel and what the nuances are, that would be better than most phone surveys I have ever heard, where they say, do you mostly agree? Do you somewhat agree? Do you disagree? Do you vehemently disagree? And if you try to explain to them, oh, I'm sorry, you have to fit into one of these categories. So, and phone surveys, I'm not sure what will happen to those of us who have a do not call number, as I do.
Those are some great questions.
Another thing that I think we need to consider is if the survey is too complex, two things happen. People zone out and they begin to suspect that there's some hidden agendas here. The reason that a sales tax is even being considered, in my opinion, is because Measure J and Measure H were successful. I would suggest that the reasons that those two were successful is that they were specific, they were to the point, they were, this is what you get. And for Measure H, it has an oversight committee, and it has a sunset at the end of paying for our sewer treatment plant. The Measure H sales tax also sunsets. That was since I worked on the Measure H committee before it even passed, I can tell you that that was a plus for people who said, yes, I'm going to vote for it then. And one of the questions I asked is, so why should I vote for it? And one of the answers I gave them is, so everybody who flushes in Placerville pays in Placerville. I think that when you get a whole list of projects that you want to fund with a sales tax, all of a sudden it looks like, to a lot of people, giving the city a blank check to do stuff that they should have figured out how to do with the budget they have. They should have been able to live within their means and do these things that have been hanging out here for 20 years, and now you want me to vote for a sales tax to fix things you should have fixed 15 years ago? I don't think so. Nobody's willing to give a blank check. If I'm going to vote for a sales tax, I want to know that it's going for specifically something that I think needs to be done, that I can see needs to be done, that I can see the potholes in the street, that I can see the disintegration of the parking lots. Then I'll vote for it. But to go for the whole litany laundry list, you won't have my vote.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see anybody else from the public getting up, so there's a couple of questions that I think that Mr. Bobrowski might be able to answer. If you don't mind getting up and responding for a couple.
Sure. I think I took notes on 3 items. Happy to respond. So your resident is correct. It's actually very difficult to get a random sample in a small community like the city of Placerville. And that's our job. So we have to call and make sure that we're meeting that demographic in every quarter of age and party and gender and even geography within town, within the city. So it's what we do professionally, and typically a survey in, let's say, Sacramento County or statewide, we can do a survey in a night or two, because we can call thousands of people and get the 300 or 500 responses we need to have the response, have the accurate data. In a case like this, we might need to have over the course of 4 or 5 nights. We'll want some weekend days and some weekdays and weekend evenings to make sure we're matching the demographics. So it's a challenge, but that's our job. That's what we do. The do not call list, just as the cell phones, does not apply to researchers. So certainly someone who gets a call from our interviewer, who's are very polite, very well trained, very comfortable talking to people. If someone chooses not to talk to us, they don't have to, and we need to then move on to the next household and find someone that meets that demographic. But yes, we call, do not call. And then as far as zoning out, it's a reality. If we're on the phone with someone for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, or in this case, maybe even 15, certainly people have other things that are pressing. They have kids that are nagging, or they've got dinner to be made. And as I said, we're very accommodating with people. What's nice is typically, especially in a community like this, people are engaged and they care about what's happening in their community, so they want to give their opinion. And it's, we're not selling anything. We're not pushing them if they can't respond or they don't want to. We say okay, but absolutely can be a long survey. But since we keep them engaged and we give them the chance to opt out and come back at a later time, as far as a callback, we typically keep people very involved and they care enough to respond. Thank you.
Doesn't apply. Oh, he answered that question. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You did.
Same as cell phones. All right. Any other questions of anybody? Okay. Any additional comments? Okay. I'll bring it back to the council.
I'll move staff's recommendation on this issue. Authorize staff to enter into an agreement with Probrowski Research for polling potential sales tax measure to include a range not to exceed $10,000.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll
Mayor-
call, please.
Mayor,
Yes.
before the vote, can I just clarify, I'm assuming you want to survey for the full range of tax measures, facilities, et cetera, as part of that. I didn't really include that in my recommendation.
For option 2, wasn't it? Was that the one, Wendy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would basically
Option
be-
2, yeah.
Yeah.
Option 2 indicate that?
Yeah, that would be basically polling for everything that we've talked
Right,
about.
and the
all-
results
all
could be,
ranges.
the results would be modified based upon the polling data.
Right, right.
So in other words, if it's clear that the public just wants one item,
That'll come
that's
out.
would be the recommendation, and that would be the,
And that gives us good information to go
Right.
on.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to find out.
There's a little bit of discrepancy between, the recommendation says to test a range of tax levels and projects with a main focus on streets and parking. But then over where it says option 2, it says phone polling for streets and facilities. So is it,
Limiting facilities to those recommended.
so is it streets and
It's-
facilities, or is it streets and parking? Is it?
That's what I want to hear from you. Do you want to
Okay.
look at everything? My main focus that I'm looking at is primarily streets and parking. Those are the things that I see as most critical. I would love to have the police station and Old City Hall. Those are my other two that I kind of looked at. But it's up to you. If you would like us to survey for all of those items, everything on the list, or just those, we can do it.
A confused mind does say no. I mean, if it's too broad, I agree with the public comment that we might not get the results that we're looking for.
So you don't think we should include the police at all in the polling even?
Actually, my preference would be, yes, let's do streets, parks, the police station,
Parking.
and Old City Hall.
So
Parking, yeah, not parks,
streets
parking.
and facilities encompasses all of that.
Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily say that we need to spend a lot of time in looking at town hall and parks
No.
and the corporation yard, those other items
Yeah,
that are
those
listed
can
in
be-
there.
I agree.
Okay.
They're a need, but I think it's going too far.
Okay, so the recommendation, so street maintenance, parking facilities, police department, and Old City Hall only.
Okay.
Say that again? What was it?
Streets maintenance, parking facilities, police department, and Old City Hall. And from that, we'll be able to determine from the public what they're looking for.
Okay, is that a clarification? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, so would you call the roll, please, for roll call vote?
Vice Mayor Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
No.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Aye.
Okay. We are now on item 11.2. Crime stats. Chief Heller.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan, Council. Try to give a brief report on crime stats from last year, 2013. 2013 compared to 2012, crime has been increasing. Part 1 crimes are up. If you break that into the two main categories of, violent crime and property crimes, violent crimes are remaining pretty much flat. I think there's a minus 1% change. Property crimes, on the other hand, have significantly increased to the tune of about 31%. Also, calls for service have increased, I think 13%, from 13,020 calls for service in 2012 to 14,649 last year. What's driving the increase in the property crime, I believe, is primarily the State of California realignment of prisoners, AB 109, combined with the habitual transit offender challenge we're continuing to face, as well as the slow economic recovery. I think those three factors, it's difficult to pinpoint which factor exactly is driving it, because those crimes that are not solved, we can't particularly say if it was an AB 109 or habitual transit, et cetera. I will say this, though, the clearance rate on property crimes is also up, and that's in the report attached to there at the end, the spreadsheet, meaning that there's more property crimes occurring. However, the department is also solving more crimes, and it's also recovering more property, more values, and that's all without a detective at the time. I think that's a testament to the work efforts of the men and women of the Placerville Police Department. In 2013, we began tracking contacts with post-release community supervised probationers, or AB 109ers as they're referred to. And officers spent approximately 153 duty hours on 54 contacts with those individuals. We also continue to face the challenge of the habitual transit offender population with continued violations and illegal camping and panhandling, et cetera. We worked on some ordinances to try to take on that challenge, and so we'll begin implementing those ordinances or enforcing those ordinances, I believe, at the end of this week or the end of this week. Other things that we're trying to do to take this on within the department, we are trying to put an emphasis on visibility in hot spots, meaning using intelligence-led policing, analyzing the data to put the cops on the dot, so to speak. Other things we are working on, we're working on a reserve officer program. We have been for some time. We'd like to bring that into reality so we can put some extra officers out there, even if it's only in a part-time capacity. I believe it would have an impact and greatly assist the full-time officers that are being taxed tremendously with the challenges we're facing. The department also has put an increase on social media and internet presence. We have the Nixle alerts. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook, and we use all those avenues to communicate with the public. We had a recent success story I think you can see in the report. Auto thefts last year, or excuse me, auto thefts in 2012, I believe we had 20 in the city. In 2013, I believe we had 30. With the community's assistance, we had a auto theft about a couple months ago over at the parking garage, and we collected the video, took some decent still shots, and put those out on Twitter, Nixle, and they were reposted by some local community Facebooks. And anyway, we were able to identify the suspect and solve that case and make an arrest pretty much or entirely on the assistance of social media. I think I mentioned the detective function. We're trying to bring that back. That would help increase the solve rate of these crimes, which obviously serves as a deterrent as well. And that's pretty much the brief snapshot. In the report, you can see the different breakdowns of different crimes. You know, there's probably a question of what has happened elsewhere. I think there's been a trend of property crimes increasing in the state. However, it is regional, much like the AB 109 issue. The neighboring cities, or I should say comparison cities of Auburn and Grass Valley, maybe even as far as Truckee, there's some increases in some areas and decreases in others. I know auto theft, there's an increase in some of the comparables. Burglary, not so much. However, in another one of the comparables, there was an increase in robberies, which we have not seen. And we've actually solved 100% of our robberies. So we're doing very well in controlling violent crime. We've got a challenge with property crime, and so we just need to step that up. And with that, I recommend accepting the informational report. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Any particular questions? Carol?
Chief, would you explain the difference between burglary and larceny?
Yeah, the burglary is actually the breaking and entering, if you will, of a residence structure. The larceny, in general terms, would be other thefts, shoplifting, thefts of from a car, that type of thing.
So just not in a house?
Correct. A house or a commercial building. A house or a commercial building, or entering with the intent, entering an inhabited dwelling with the intent to steal would all be burglaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Because that's the one that jumped the most.
Yes. Chief, do we have any way of knowing that of the habitual transient offender incidents, how many of those were probationers?
It's a little bit of a moving target. I would say it is based on meetings with probation. There's a breakdown of numbers. I can tell you that traditional probationers, 28 on the west slope. I can tell you that AB 109ers, it's for post-release community supervision, the PRCSs, 9 by my last count, and mandatory community supervision, 7. So 16 in total that would be considered sort of AB 109ers, that would be considered transient offenders on the entire western slope, not just Placerville. And 28 traditional probationers that would be on the western and complete western slope, not just Placerville. And being transient, it's kind of difficult to say which part of the western slope. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Who are reserve officers?
The reserve officers would be basically part-time police officers that would, there's a post-certified police officer commission certification for these individuals who would serve as police officers in a part-time capacity. They would have training, they would be armed, and they would serve at a lesser than a full-time function. So often what it would be is younger folks looking to get maybe their foot in the door, get a little bit of experience and exposure, and also maybe local business owners, citizens that just don't want to do a full-time job but can pass a background, are interested in engaging these issues in the community. And lastly, probably, you know, maybe retirees that still are want to do police work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, I don't know how your shield is doing, but I know they're good eyes and ears. I also realize that they put a lot of time into community fundraising events just out at the fairgrounds or wherever, especially last Saturday when it was raining like cats and dogs. A couple of those guys out there working along with the explorers from the county sheriff's office. But I just want that thank you to get back to those guys that are SHIELDs. They are truly volunteers. They really enjoy what they're doing, and we really do appreciate and obviously couldn't do all the things we do without some of that help. So I just wanted to pass that back to you, an observation I had the other evening. If that's the end of that, and no other questions, I'll move to the next item, which was...
Public comment?
I think public comment on that.
It's not it's information item.
It's information.
Oh, is there any public comments or questions of the police chief? Hey.
Do we have to accept it?
I don't know.
They
We'll ask the
recommend,
attorney.
they recommend that we accept it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept the informational report on
Second.
crime statistics.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Item, I believe, is it 15?
11-3.
11:03.
Comcast.
Okay, 11.3, and I missed that. Oh, here it is. Sorry. That would be Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will go very quickly on this. I want to state that we have Darren Baldy from our IT department in the audience to answer questions on this. He's going to let me give the report, but he'll answer the technical questions. We also have behind the curtain, the man behind the curtain that is also our IT department that can
The
help
other
us
IT
if
guy.
need be. This is something that Darren's been working on, and he brought to us actually just this last week that he's been putting together. In the past, we've had a problem with the reliability of our internet service and our system, primarily due to the way the setup is. What was at one time a very good technology. I remember years ago when T1 lines were the thing to have for businesses, and they worked very well. To a certain extent, they've kind of outlived their technology life, if you will. And so Darren's been working on other things. This has caused some problems with us, I would say, and mainly in our police department. What happens is if our server at City Hall goes down, they go down at the police department. And the only way to fix it is to call Darren or George out at 2 o'clock in the morning, have them come into City Hall, and I'll just say for simple terms, reset the server so that it starts up again. That same situation also happens at our wastewater treatment plant. And if they actually have a laptop computer they can take home and monitor the system from home. Saves us having to have somebody at the plant 24 hours a day. However, if that server currently goes down at City Hall due to a power outage, internet failure, whatever, George or Darren, again, 2 o'clock in the morning, they have to come out and reset the system. The third area that I will mention is one that in our finance department that I didn't mention in this report that is becoming more of a need now is, as you recall, we're close to, and Dave can update us on this if need be, but we're close to going to the cloud, if you will, for our software, financial software, which means for all of our utility billing and things like that, we need to rely on the internet for that program. Same thing, power goes down, et cetera, we could be in trouble. And when our server goes down currently, everything goes down. So Darren has put together this program that is based on newer technology. It's basically, we would be going to Comcast service at each of our public sites, and then, so they will, with some other work that IT will do, they will operate independently, do not necessarily have to go through City Hall to operate. Good news about all of this, as you noted in the report, it does actually save us money over the long run. There is some upfront cost of about $5,000, but then we recover that over about 28 months is our estimation at this point. So the other piece of this, and Darren can define this or describe it better, is besides the Comcast line that we're getting, we're also recommending for this additional $10 that he outlines in his report, a Verizon hotspot, if you will, that will be a backup to the Comcast internet service. So if the Comcast service goes down, this Verizon 4G hotspot will kick in and pick up where the Comcast service went down. So essentially it gives us that backup for especially like things like with police department, like the wastewater treatment plant, and then again with our financial software that will back that up in case of a problem with the Comcast internet service. So that's kind of the layman's terms description of what we have. Darren and or George could define and answer any questions you have on that. As noted in the report, the cost is $5,500 for the work that we need to be done approximately. And then obviously we'll have begin recouping some of that immediately because of the savings that we will have from the new service. So what we are requesting is that you authorize us to proceed with this project, authorize myself to enter into a contract with Comcast and for the new service and to purchase the new equipment, and we will proceed with that immediately upon your approval. Need to note also that that does need to come from our contingency funds, both general fund, sewer, and water funds that will pay a portion of that cost. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions. Wow, I just want you guys to know that I spent about a half hour today with Darren. I learned more about this than I really wanted to know.
Did you learn, or did you just listen?
Well, you got to remember, I years ago when there was tubes, I was an electronics technician, so I understood quite a bit more than I thought.
Good for you. Good
she
for
doesn't
you.
even know what a vinyl is, so come on. Dave Price will answer that question for you later. But no, I had some questions about, well, why do we need the one in the garage, and how does the Wi-Fi work, and some other things. But basically, the key thing is it gives us some redundancy, gives us some backup, gives us some, in addition to saving some money just on our regular monthly bill, it will also save staff time, which overtime is not good, and so it's not that I don't mind those guys working, but I just assume that they got a full night's sleep and come into work the next morning. But so that's my 2 cents. And
I just think that for security, if nothing else, you know, what Cleve told us about, you know, if one goes down, they all go down, and I think that's kind of scary.
You think?
Anyway, I think it's a good thing.
okay, can I get a motion then?
Public comment?
Yeah, I was going to just ask for a motion first, but any public comment? No. Okay. Yeah, it is. 21st century is here, so all right. Now can I have a motion?
I so move that we accept option 2, authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Comcast for new Comcast circuits and to purchase the necessary routers at a not-to-exceed cost of $5,500.
Been moved and seconded. We need a roll call because this is money coming out of them.
Vice Mayor Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Thank you. That passes. Item 15.1.
I hear a clock.
Poor guy was here all night.
Ah, that's funny.
It's coming from the other room.
Oh, George.
Our
I
friend-
forgot he was here.
Our friend back there.
All right, item 15.1, Mr. Rivas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I
I'll
wanted
get
to
to it in
give
a
a brief report on the status of the El Dorado County Animal Shelter. Just to sort of recap, a conditional use permit was approved by the Planning Commission back in January of 2007, And that permit allowed for a temporary relocation of the animal shelter that was formerly located at the city's wastewater treatment plant on Coldwater Creek, and that allowed for the expansion of the facility. This animal shelter has operated successfully at its 511 Placerville Drive location. I'm sorry, I keep hearing something. Without incident or complaints. The county has acquired property in the Park West Business Park in Diamond Springs containing a 21,800 square foot commercial building, and that's located at 6435 Capitol Avenue. And Animal Services will be consolidating their operations at the new location following completion of necessary improvements on the building and property. The county has put the project out to bid in December of last year, and the bid opening is scheduled for February 12th of 2014, and the county is anticipating moving to the new animal shelter in September of this year. And that concludes staff's report.
Okay. And I didn't see, there's just, we have to receive the report and file it? Any comments?
Yeah, the recommendation would be receive report.
Okay, thank you. And now I'll back up to item 12. I just want to keep everybody on their toes. Secretary, the clerk's going to kill me tomorrow. Item 12. Let's just start with El Dorado County Transit Authority. Ms. Borelli, you were absent.
I was absent from transportation, and SEDCOR, so I only have one report, and that's from SEDCOR, and I will, when you get ready for that, I'll...
Thank you.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Just say yes, I attended.
You attended? Was there anything that applied to the city?
No.
Thank you. Okay. How about Councilmember Thomas on the El Dorado Transportation Commission?
Oh, you go for that, Mayor Hagan.
I already reported on it.
Yeah,
basically, I did cover it, and it was the financing issues.
We're good.
I'd like to also announce that the new vice chair of that committee is now former Mayor Thomas, Wendy Thomas. LAFCO, any meeting? Any comments?
Yes, there was a meeting, nothing pertaining to the city.
Okay. All right. SEDCORP. Ms. Borelli on SEDCORP.
Yeah, okay. I was unable to attend the meeting, but I just would like to call attention again. It was in the Democrat, and it's I contacted George and asked him to put it on our Facebook. But SEDCOR is they're conducting classes. They're resuming them this month for located in Auburn, Placerville, and Roseville, that are focused on areas of business planning, finances, marketing, time management, and selling your business. And I have to tell you, it says, in addition, SEDCOR has invited 4 state agencies to discuss basic sales and use tax, e-procurement, state basic payroll tax, and state income tax and small business. And it gives a phone number to call them, but I believe also you can go online to SEDCOR. And I have heard so many good reports about the classes that these folks conduct. Unfortunately, I have not attended any of them, but they're certainly worthwhile and very affordable. And I would recommend anyone who may be struggling a little bit with some of these different areas, small business people, or somebody who's thinking about maybe going into business, that you attend these classes, because they really do assist you in making the right choices.
Okay.
Okay. On the
sorry.
On the 2x2, I always appreciate the ability to talk about issues of mutual benefit with the county at an informal setting. And the basic issues this last time is we are, based on City Manager Morris's action, we're revisiting land use issues, which I really appreciate you bringing that up. And we're once again really revving up, looking at how we plan, especially with the Missouri Flat Corridor and Placerville being in close proximity, what kind of land use issues make sense for our mutual benefit. And so that will be an ongoing discussion that we will have. The homeless on the homeless situation, they are working on a truly transitional program, and they're in the middle of that, and it will not be a shelter, it will be truly transitional and increasing our capacity for those people that are working on moving up and out and through homelessness. So look forward to seeing what that'll be coming back pretty soon, I think. And the grant writing service is close, and we are working with the county to have that available to procure more revenue for our city. So those were the main issues.
All right.
Who are the two? Who are the two supervisors on that?
Supervisor Veerkamp and Supervisor Briggs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I have a correction to mine, since you brought it up. And Patty wasn't there, but we do have a new chair and vice chair of the Transit Authority, and the chair is Briggs, and the vice chair is Tricia Wilkins.
Oh,
All right.
congratulations.
Good for you. Okay, requests for any future agenda items? Anybody on the council have requests or items?
I wanted to follow up maybe, and it might be appropriate in the budget times, but with Mike Kobus' request to talk about the holiday ice rink and how the city can help with that. We talked a little bit about it before, and I don't know if we'd do it here at a regular meeting all by itself, or if it would be part of the budget process.
Probably part of the budget.
Because I would like to figure out a way to support them.
I'd like to have that discussion too. I agree with that.
I think what we can do, based on a couple of things I just heard, we'll put an item for that in the budget, and then that'll give you the opportunity during budget time to talk about amounts that
Maybe
you'd like to consider.
Maybe some, in that area, TOT is a possible area that might be able, I don't know how that's going now, but I mean, I know in the future, there's potential for some income in that area if we ever get a motel.
Yeah,
economic
TOT
development.
tax would be great. I mean, we didn't,
Yeah.
that wasn't even talked about at all.
No, I know, but that
Yeah.
might be a possible source for that because of the.
Right.
Okay.
So we can include it in there in a manner that you can discuss levels during the
Great.
budget process. We'll put some in there.
I have one other item,
Okay.
Mayor Hagan, and that has to do with the fund of the economic uncertainty, the magic fund, and that we spent $15,000 out of it today. So could you, as part of the whole budgeting thing, kind of update us on that? Because I know I've asked before how we're repaying that fund. And so I just would like to, and I want to keep it in the,
Okay.
in the conversation, in the topic.
Let me just clarify. There's two things. One of the things would be your reserve fund, and then this fund for contingency for economic uncertainties, which is a set amount. This year it's $75,000, which you have for contingency amounts we can spend this year. The reserve is a separate item that is above and beyond that. It's a reserve fund that we have in place.
So the two items that were voted on, the $10,000 for the poll and the portion I thought was only, it was 3,000 because one of it was Measure H and one was Measure J.
Right, right.
So that pot of money, those were different than
Those are from, this year we budget, in our budget process, we set aside $75,000 for contingencies in the general fund.
Just a reserve account then?
It's separate from the reserve account. It's things that we know we're gonna have some things we're gonna have to spend. So
Okay.
it's budgeted as far as current year revenues that you would spend.
Oh, okay. So it's not
So it doesn't
the-
affect that reserve account that you're talking about, that you wanna see how we pay back
Right,
eventually
right.
an increase.
They're
Yeah.
two different places.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Dave, am I correct? Is that good?
That's
explanation?
correct. And just to give you an update on the balance of that $75,000 contingency for unforeseen expenditures, you now have, based on the actions you took tonight, you have about $16,000 left in that contingency for the remainder of the year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cleve, I talked to you earlier about the dog parks thing, and you were going to look into it and get back. Have you gotten?
I've done a little bit of work on that, talking to a couple of people. There is some work going on to look at what it's going to cost and some drawings and et cetera. So there's some work going on by some private people on that.
Okay, because I would like to, when you find out, I would like to talk to
Right.
you more about it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, upcoming items?
Mayor, can I address two more items under city manager and staff reports quickly?
Yeah, okay.
They're not actually
I was just trying to
your
move
list.
on, I'm sorry.
I know.
Wendy wanted to get out of here at 7 tonight, so I don't know, she had a hot date or something.
I was contacted today by a company called CGI Communications. They do the videos that are on our website. And they do those for free to the city. I guess you can call it for free. How they fund it, though, is they go out and offer to businesses within the community the opportunity to also have a video on that site that, in other words, they would have a presence on our videos, and then people can click on that and go to their video to see what kind of services that business offers, and so it helps promote their business. The original contract was done 3 years ago, and it's now time to update that. They're offering the service again to us, and we have the opportunity to update 4 of our videos that we have on there. I believe we have 5 on the site, but we can offer, they'll update 4 of those for us. So all I'm asking for tonight is that would you please go back and review those videos? I don't know how often you do that. Review those and just take some notes, some comments about what you think we may need to change on those videos to update those. I have some ideas of my own, but I'd like to get your ideas on what kind of thing. They will then write the script for it. They'll come out and do the videos. Also looking for recommendations on who should be in the videos. The current ones have former Mayor Thomas in them. It can be the mayor, it can be another council member, it can be members of the public, and there probably will be some members of the public that will talk on that under different scenarios. But any recommendations you have in that area, I would appreciate. You can get those to me, and then we'll start planning for that. The second item I wanted to mention is, just for your information, through the county has applied for a grant through the state that very likely they will get. And they applied on our behalf for $5,000, and this would be for new garbage cans / recycling containers on our main street. Now, before we get into that, though, we have to decide what we want in terms of garbage can and recycling containers. So I'm going to work on putting together a process where we can look at some things and then have the council approve what those new containers would look like. So
the ones that are out there cost about $900 apiece.
They are, yeah. So this will only get us maybe 5 or 6, depending on where we're at. But if we establish what we want, then we can proceed to look at other grants. This is the second opportunity I've had. The first one, we weren't able to get things in on time, but these come up at least once a year, and probably more often than that, these opportunities for this type of recycling type grants. So
I wanted to ask you, you said about when it triggered something about the council choosing. We voted a long time ago about some improvements on the overpass and the brick and the, have you heard anything more about that, or where are we in that?
I'm going to look at, Nate left, didn't he? I can't look at Nate. I'll have to report back to you on that. I have not heard. I know they did some initial survey work and things on it, but I haven't heard.
It was a long time ago, and I thought, I was under the impression it was going to happen, you know, soon.
It's Caltrans.
It's Caltrans, but then
I
it might have
will-
been put on the list to back, you know. like
I'll
they do
find out
everything
for you.
else.
Yeah.
All right, upcoming items. It looks like we have tentatively scheduled the next regular meeting will be February 25th. It will include Blair's Lane Bridge, the 2013 Fire Code, recreation program fees, and notice of intent to amend the zoning maps. Is that correct, Mr.? Are we going to be ready for the zoning map next week? Pierre? Are we ready for the zoning maps next in?
That's some other things that they've been working on. That's
Oh, that's not what we talked.
All right.
I was going to say, wow, that's going to be.
Yeah, that would be a notice of intent to amend the zoning ordinance. There's typically, just real brief, there's 3 ways typically that a request to amend the zoning map would occur, a rezone property, and that's either by application from the property owner or a resolution of intent to amend by the planning commission or the city council.
Okay.
So this particular one is to authorize a formal process for amending the zoning map to add the Main Street Commercial District as an historic district.
Great. Thank you for that update. And seeing nothing else, I did change the agenda slightly, and if there are council members who attend events that are apropos for the city and you want to make a report on it, I will let you do so. I'm trying to streamline it a little bit. Obviously, my attempt tonight didn't, well, it's at 9:45. It could be worse. We had a very large agenda. I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we will be returning on February 25th at 5 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. regular session. And I'm going to adjourn this meeting in memory of Skip Kelly. He passed away within the past couple of weeks. Skip was a partner in Carter Kelly for a long term. There's a memorial service tomorrow for him at the Forney Building at noon at the fairgrounds. Skip was on the board of directors for the fair for a long time and was a major contributor to many projects there, very involved in 4-H. Just a side note, and I believe it was in 1979 or 80, Skip Kelly and Jim Carter created Carter Kelly Construction. One of their first projects in the city limits was this town hall we're in. It was a purity store many years ago. After that, it was a city library, and after the county library opened, the city combined, and this was converted into a town hall. And they were the contractors that put this together. And that's almost 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, and it's done pretty well. There are probably some things that need to be touched up, but we'll leave that up to Mr. Ewell. He lives here every day. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.